the meeting in English while simultaneously translating in Spanish. If you look at the bottom of your Zoom screen where you see the toolbar with different icons, you'll see a tab that says Interpretation. And if you click on that icon, you can select Spanish, and you'll then be prompted to a different screen where our translator, Yalin, will be visible and the Spanish translation will be activated. Yalin, bienvenido esta noche. So our translator is already translating that. I want to make sure that she has time to translate what I just said before I start. Estamos listos. Okay, great. With that, then, I'd like to now invite Ms. Loese to take the roll.
Okay, student trustees Nori.
Here.
Trustee Dubois.
Here.
Trustee Jack.
Here.
Trustee Sarver.
Here.
Trustee Thompson.
Here.
And President Weiner.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Excellent. Next item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. I'm sure that my board colleagues have had a chance to review the agenda. Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
I motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so we've approved. Excellent. So we've approved our agenda for this evening, which brings us to item 6, which is a report out of closed section. I can report that by a unanimous vote, the Board of Trustees approved a settlement agreement in case number 2020-2021-3. That's what we did in closed session. That brings us now to our consent agenda. As my colleagues know well, board action to approve the items on the consent agenda is taken simultaneously with one single motion, which is not debatable and requires a unanimous roll call vote for passage. The action indicated on each item is deemed to have been considered in full and action taken as worded therein. If a member of the board, if the superintendent, or any member of the public so requests, any item shall be removed from this section and shall be placed on the regular order of business. Is there a request to remove anything from the consent agenda this evening? Okay, seeing none, then I would invite a motion to waive the reading of the consent agenda, to accept the reports, adopt the resolutions, and to approve the other items.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, Ms. Loese, this does require a roll call vote.
Unmute. Student trustee Nori.
Aye.
Trustee Dubois.
Yes.
Trustee Jack.
Yes.
Trustee Sarver.
Yes.
Trustee Thompson.
Yes.
President Weiner.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Excellent. We did a lot of business, and I think one of the things we may notice is that there's an effort to try to get all of our contracts for the coming school year negotiated and finalized in advance. And so I commend both the superintendent and Ms. Leach for that commitment to good order and practice. That brings us now to item 8, which is special recognitions. And Dr. Strachey, I think, would like to say something about our summer school graduation.
Absolutely. President Weiner and the Board of Trustees and panelists and participants tonight. I would like to recognize the class of 2020 summer graduates. We were fortunate to be able to watch a ceremony earlier today, expertly put together by the team. It was beautiful and inspirational that they worked throughout the summer in these crazy times, never giving up, to get their Sequoia diploma. They're now part of our alumni family. What they started their freshman year, they went all the way through to earn their high school diplomas. And on behalf of the district, I would like to take this moment to congratulate them and wish them the best. I also want them to know that they will always have a home here at Sequoia High School District. Please come back and visit your teachers. They really want to know how you're doing. If anyone is interested, their virtual graduation ceremony is posted on our Facebook page. I encourage everybody to watch it. I'd also like to take this moment to congratulate the summer school coordinator, Tiffany Burkle, for a job well done. It was an extraordinary lift to carry out the summer program virtually as the conditions and the guidelines were rapidly changing. We had to start school. But here we are celebrating these graduating seniors. It was absolutely well done, and we're so proud of you. I want to say that next board meeting, we have scheduled to get some reports from summer school, and then we'll also recognize our wonderful summer school principals who also carried it all the way through. So thank you, everybody. Congratulations.
Thank you. That brings us to item 9, which is student trustee comments. Trustee Nori, do you have things to share with the board this evening?
Not as anything as of now.
All right, well, we will keep you in reserve. That brings us then to item 10, which is comments from our bargaining units, SDTA and AFSCME. Start with Ms. Salvatore. Edith?
Hi, I wanted to comment that we are very, very pleased that we were able to come to an agreement on our side letter with the district defining the expectations and parameters for distance learning and the health and safety protocols that will be in place for those people who access campus during the period of distance learning. We worked for 44 hours after school let out on June 5th, which was unprecedented for our bargaining unit. We normally take a recess for the summer and don't make teachers come in on unpaid summer time. But this was definitely something that was important. It was important to our members, and I feel it's incredibly necessary in this public forum, given some unfortunate communication that went out to parents under the banner of district email to reinforce how very much our district's teachers are looking forward to being back in the classroom, working together with students. It's what we've been looking forward to. It's all we've been focused on. And it's why we worked those 44 hours to make sure that we could have the best possible situation in place for students when we start on August 17th. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Salvatore. I see Ms. Horton is in the meeting. Grace, do you have comments to share this evening?
Hello, good evening, everyone. I didn't present, I'm sorry, I didn't, I'm feeling a little jelly in the brain right now, sorry. I really don't have anything prepared other than it was nice to get back to campus and see all of our coworkers. Looking forward to safety protocols being rolled out at each site, and had a nice chat with Jacqueline, and it's always nice to talk to Jacqueline and get that leadership direction. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Horton. Thanks very much. Okay, so that now brings us to public comment. And as I indicated, this is the opportunity for members of the public to address the board on matters that are not on the agenda. And so as we indicated, the way for members of the public to indicate they want to comment on non-agendized items would be to raise their blue electronic hand in Zoom. And I see I see one hand that is raised. And so again, we have just one speaker, so we'll go ahead and allocate 3 minutes for Ms. Ellen Jacobson. Ms. Jacobson, you are currently unmuted, and
Thank you.
if you were able to display Ms. Pulido.
My picture's not able to come up.
No, I'm talking about asking my my colleague Ana Maria Pulido to display her screen so that you just have a sense of your time. But
Okay.
you may begin.
Thank you, board members and our superintendent. I just wanted to reaffirm what Edith said, that the teachers at Sequoia Union High School District want to return to the classroom. We want the best for our students, and we want to make sure that we're going to be safe. Everybody's going to be safe. And the lack of communication coming from the top down has been very disheartening this past semester and summer. And many of my colleagues are feeling a little exhausted from all the classes we've been taking this summer. And we really haven't heard any recognition or a thank you publicly from our superintendent, I feel. And as a result, like I said, that was one of the main reasons why I signed that vote of no confidence, that the lack of communication, lack of leadership was shown. And I just needed to let everybody hear that publicly, because I know the superintendent wrote an email out to parents. And again, it felt like she was not acknowledging her staff's hard work. And I know the staff has been working really, really hard. And the teachers have been very, very diligent about learning new platforms. So I want the parents out there to know that the teachers and staff have been working very hard to benefit your students when they return to this online model, which is not ideal, but we are doing everything we can to make sure that the learning process goes as smoothly, as engaging as it can be. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Okay.
Alan, if I can interject, I'm getting messages from people trying to watch on YouTube saying that they're not seeing anything.
I beg your pardon?
I'm getting messages from folks who are trying to watch on YouTube live on the platform and they're not seeing anything. So I just wanted to let whoever's running it know.
I will let Ms. Pulido and Mr. Alva know about that. Thank you for passing that along. Okay, that brings us now to item 13 of our agenda, our first, our only information item, which is item 13.1 concerning the Equity and Diversity Council update. This is something I think that there's been a great deal of interest in on the part of our board, which has held a couple of study sessions to try to dig a little bit deeper into what it means for us to govern with an equity lens, and delighted to know that there is interest in partnership from members of our staff to work collectively on this vital problem. Turn this over to Dr. Streschley.
Thank you, President Weiner. We are excited about the launch of this effort. It's been a long time coming. I jumped on for the ride enthusiastically, but I cannot take credit for the fierce commitment and the initiation that came from our teachers across the district. And it takes that amount of both commitment to our students as well as commitment to this extra effort to affect the culture and how we work together across the district. So we invited, because this is such a big, important effort that will comprise lots and lots of people in this basically communication and learning together, that we invited a consultant named Nicole Anderson. Her name became familiar to us as the board participated, and myself, in an Equity Network series that was sponsored by the San Mateo County CSBA, School Boards Association. And we had a really inspiring experience. And then we brought her to do a board study session, and we got a little deeper in the conversation, and it still was really scratching the surface. And then when the teachers came forward and really talked about their great ideas, we thought she would be a good continuity to continue working at various levels of our district, from the council that will be creating, maybe even pushing into the subsequent site committees, continue working with the board, as well as people on an individual basis. So without much ado, I'm going to have Nicole Anderson give a little introduction. We're going to then invite a couple of speakers. I'm not sure how many. Maybe Pablo, you can start, and then do a little baton, and then we'll have Nicole do a little summary about the next steps in the process. It is a process. We have a lot of good initial ideas that took a lot of hard work over the summer, and then we're going to rely on Nicole to help us figure out how to get this right, because we need to have a lot of voices at the table, and this is hopefully something sustainable, that is something that's embedded deeply in the culture for many years. So Nicole Anderson, I don't see your face. Oh, there you are. You could have the floor.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Shreshley. I really appreciate the introduction, and just want to say hello to the community at large. Of course, all of the board members here, the governance team. It's so good to see you again. I hate that we're not in person, but definitely miss hanging out with you, and just good to see you. Hello to all the district leaders and all the fearless principals on the line, and every teacher, every community member, and every student. Of course, your families. And I just want to start with just acknowledging the community and acknowledging the harm, the pain, and all that has been going on in these last couple of months, but also the last couple of hundred of years, right? Education, this work I entered into because I have a passion to really address educational equity issues within districts, and obviously wanting to interrupt institutional racism, which is something that's near and dear to many of our hearts. And so I just want to kind of introduce myself. You know, I definitely have been working with lots of districts around the state of California, working with school board members to engage more deeply in this work, to create systemic change, and not just change that lasts a year or two, but really to support the work. And I just want to just acknowledge the board first for your work. There are so many boards that are trying to get this right. And I just want to commend you on your intentionality. I want to commend you on your vision, and know that this is a long journey ahead. And as I always remind you, you know, we go slow to go fast. So I just want to commend you on the work you've done already to set the stage for this work, because this is really important for school districts to be able to thrive in this type of work, to interrupt institutional racism. It requires a really strong vision from governance teams. So I just want to commend you for that. And if I was there near you, I'd give you a high five. I want to say also, just acknowledging the Equity and Diversity Council. I just want to say, it's kind of an introduction. My role in the school district was really to come and do a variety of things. And one was to support the Equity and Diversity Council work, and the vision for really creating a space that would be formal and very much a space to recommend and advise the board on ways to really impact institutional racism around the district. Of course, also working with several of the schools, including Tide. Good to see you on there, Allison. I think I saw Allison and her team. Excited to work with them. Also to continue to support the board, and possibly even facilitate some equity walks down the road when we can actually come back together and walk on campuses together. So my role as a consultant is really to provide kind of a broad scope of work around educational equity. But tonight, just kind of introducing, because there's a brilliant group of people I got to meet recently, who have obviously been working hard in the trenches to really create a space for educational equity to not only live at the site level, but across the district. And so I really commend this group and look forward to working with them. As I shared with them in our last, couple of meetings together, we had a lot of work to do, and they have a lot of work to do. And my role and goal is to really facilitate and support, so that there's systemic change and that this change lasts. That is ultimately my role as a facilitator. And I want to make sure that I am very conscious of learning about the community and really supporting the action plan process, and really supporting the ability to gain some research around what are the best practices to sustain this work. And so I'm super excited. I'm going to get ready to pass the virtual mic over to one of the key folks who have been in the trenches really doing this work together, but want to acknowledge all of the Equity and Diversity Council members. Trying to see everybody on the screen. I think I see everyone, but just want to say hello, Glenda and Pablo and Amy and Taja. And I think I feel like I'm missing someone. Excuse my glasses for not working. But I just want to acknowledge you all and really thank you for the time and look forward to working with you this year. I know we have a long road to go, but I'm really encouraged by the work and want to pass that virtual mic over and to Pablo, and we'll again be here to support the group for the long haul. So just want to thank you again and appreciate being acknowledged and welcome into your district and your community. I don't take that lightly, so thank you.
Well, thank you, Nicole. Anna, is a presentation being shown? All right, well, I'll just introduce myself to everyone. My name is Pablo Aguilera. I am a teacher at Sequoia High School. I also previously taught at Woodside High School. I'm also an alumni of Woodside High School. So I've been involved in the community for a long time. And what I want to make sure is we clarify exactly what this council is. We've heard the Equity and Diversity Council name being dropped all over the place. And I think a lot of people don't know exactly what it is. So we want to be able to kind of show what our vision is. So it is very imperative for everyone to know that the people that I'm about to introduce, we are consisting of the design team, as we call ourselves. We are not the Equity and Diversity Council. All right, so part of the team includes myself, also includes Glenda Ortez Galan, Amy Hansen, Taja Henderson, and Elisa Nosedal. And it's imperative for everyone to know that we are just presenting a vision of the structure that will allow for true equity to happen in the district, but also in all the schools. And the five of us are, again, not the council, because I've heard this many times, so I gotta make sure everyone understands that. And what we're trying to do is provide a structure for a unified district, unifying all the schools across the district in order to analyze policies, structures, and practices in our schools and the district overall to actually achieve true equity and diversity in this district, which is long overdue. So Anna, you can go to the next slide, please. So I wanna provide a little history first as to how this came to be, because there's a lot of questions about this. So on May 13th, the teachers of color in the district, many teachers of color, signed a letter that was asking for better representation in the Academic Operations Task Force, which was underrepresented by the communities of color. And that exact task force in the letter was asking for better representation. Now, part of the letter also asked for the establishment of an Equity and Diversity Task Force. In the Academic Operations Task Force, the representation issue was remedied immediately after, and I want to thank Bonnie Hansen for that. She talked to us and was able to remedy as much as she could. But what we talked about as well is that Bonnie was limited within the confines that she was given. For example, certain positions in the district had to be present. She was told they had to be in there. So because of the different practices, but also structures in the district, a lot of those positions happen to have white staff. So that's why it also led to that underrepresentation of the communities of color. So that's why this letter also asked for the establishment of an Equity and Diversity Task Force or council to actually be able to analyze these practices and structures in order to address these discrepancies. So Bonnie, I give her a lot of credit for doing as best she can, but she was limited. So we all have to look at these structures in order to better address them. So furthermore, in the meeting on February 3rd, I had with Superintendent Streshley and also a couple of teachers of color in the district, we were sharing our experiences as staff of color in the district, saying, because there are issues that come up. And in that, the superintendent told us that representation is incredibly important. So once we saw that there wasn't much representation in the Academic Operations Task Force, we were like, we have to speak up and make sure that we address these district practices and structures in order to better address them. So because of these structural designs that led to inequities and underrepresentation, the letter also asked for this council because we have to truly analyze it. This system is actually necessary because without the direct and explicit systems to combat and change structures, the inequities and underrepresentation will continue to happen. For example, in this district for a long time, we've had a lack of administrators of color, especially Black and Brown administrators, including the superintendent's cabinet, despite the fact that it is a district of 65% students of color. So these structures, unless we directly analyze it and change and kind of fight them, then we could actually achieve what we actually need. Now, from this point, the letter was sent and the Academic Operations Task Force was remedied and went forward. However, this came a month before George Floyd and all the uprisings going on in society. It was only after this incident that we started seeing a call to ask us to come in to actually talk about this council. So it's important for us to actually note that the call from the staff of color came before the uprisings that we've seen in the summer. It came from years of frustration and oppression. So it's also important to know that we are also standing on the shoulders of our BIPOC peers and predecessors who have fought for this for many years, and we're just asking to continue the work. It's also important that I want to note that a lot of this design work was done by staff of color and some allies whom historically in our district have not had the space or voice and have always done great work. However, the recognition for this work and credit have been taken and used for recognition and achievements and promotions by others. So I want to make sure that this council can be a place for everyone to join in the work to improve our district. But it's also important for us to know the history and the spirit in which this came about in order to give credit to the voices that are often overlooked, however, are integral in our district. So for this reason, we're trying to keep our presentation in the allotted time, but I hope that you forgive us if we go a bit over. Historically in the district, staff of color have not had their voices heard or a seat at the table. So I think it's not too much to ask for a little flexibility in our time. So if we go on to the next slide, please. That letter that we sent was signed by over 250 staff. Now, the staff that were signing, I want everyone to know that this was mainly just teachers and counselors. It was certificated staff. The reason behind that was because of job security. Because while 250 signatures is impressive, what was more shocking was the number of staff, especially staff of color, who did not sign because they expressed their concern over retaliation and job security, which says something about the environment that we and how this work is necessary going forward. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So our vision for this in the design team that is working independently of what was going on with Nicole before. So our vision is to design and support a framework that is rooted in equity and social justice that promotes redefining and creating district and school policies and practices, which will further empower and enhance the opportunities and outcomes of currently underrepresented communities of the Sequoia Union High School District. That is the vision we have. Now, we're going to go through this presentation, give some general overview, and I'm going to pass the baton on to my colleague, Amy Hansen, for this.
Good evening. My name is Amy Hansen, and I'm a teacher at Woodside High School. So as the design team got together, we agreed upon the 5 A's: accountability, awareness, access, advancement and empowerment, and acknowledgement as the council's guiding principles. Next slide, please. The 5 A's will guide us in addressing inequality and promoting equity and social justice. Next slide. As a district, we must ask ourselves, are we striving for equality or are we striving for equity? Equity will provide tools and resources to address inequality and strive for social justice. Next slide. As a design team, we developed a process for achieving equity in education in the Sequoia Union High School District. This process has 4 steps. The first one is understanding. As educators, we must first seek to understand our students, their families, and communities. Next, based on our understanding, we will work to dismantle oppressive systems and structures. Step 3, we will then create new systems and structures that ensure every student has a fair opportunity for success. The final step in the process is to evaluate, measure, and growth. And this cycle will continually repeat itself in order to foster a cycle of inquiry and change. As you'll see as the presentation continues, this process will be put into place in different focus areas. So many people will be working through this process and continually using the process year after year to make sure that systemic change is sustained.
Hi, I'm Taja Henderson, and I'd like to thank Pablo and Amy for talking about why the Equity and Diversity Council is needed. I am a teacher at Sequoia High School, and I will talk to you more about our process of how the structure will be. If you can go to the next slide, please. So one of our principles is all about empowerment. We wanted to make sure that underrepresented voices had a seat at the table. And to ensure that, we made it so that each site would have their own equity and diversity council. Within that council at the school sites, we are encouraging all classified, all certificated staff who would like to join the council to come in and get involved in this work. We'd also love to see admin join us in this process. And we have talked to the superintendent and invited the superintendent to come in and to work with the school sites just to understand what these systems, these practices, and these policies are at play. We also will have a district component. The district component will consist of 2 representatives from each site. And we are also encouraging the board to investigate and to look at the need of hiring the position of the Director of Equity and Diversity. We feel that we need a district level position in order to facilitate and to guide this work. I believe Nicole talked about the amount of work that we would like to look at and to look at these systems at play. And it will need someone who is dedicated to oversee this process. And Pablo will come back in later in the presentation and speak more directly about that position of Director of Equity and Diversity. Next slide, please. When we talk about the purpose, again, the first year, it's all about looking at these systems. So at the school site level, and actually schools have already got a jump start on this work. Over the course of the summer, several schools have incorporated book clubs to look at anti-racist teaching. And our idea is that those book clubs would roll into a formal council where they would research and analyze all of these systems at play. So once school gets started back up, which is next week, we would like to turn those informal book clubs into formal councils where we are recognized in doing this work. And on the district level, the responsibility would be for those 2 site reps just to report back to the board what's happening in the schools and on the district level, just to make sure everyone's informed of all of the work that is being done. Next slide, please. And then finally, again, as Pablo had mentioned earlier, word on the street is that we are the council. We are simply the design team. And again, we wanted to make sure that voices were empowered to participate. So one way that we have inclusiveness is that no one's going to be turned away from doing the work at your site. However, if you are interested in becoming one of those reps for the district level, we will have a process to submit an interest form so that we can make sure that we have an equitable and a diversified council representing the district as we underdo this work. So we will next have Glenda come in and to speak to us more about the focus groups of what this work will actually look like.
Thank you, Taja. Hi, again, my name is Glenda Ortez Galan, proud head counselor at East Palo Alto Academy. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present our framework. The 5 focus groups that I will delve into are our recommendations that we feel are most essential for our students of color and staff. It is based on our expertise as educators on the front lines, data, and the current literature on anti-racist work. We understand that some sites and departments are already doing some of this work, yet in order to ensure that students benefit from the 5 groups, we feel that it must be done on a systemic level. School sites can modify, adjust, and add topics as they see fit. There is a document attached to the slides that has more in-depth information. I will just briefly touch upon each of the focus groups to just give you a preview of what can be done in these groups. We can go to the next slide, please. The first focus group looks at the need for professional development. This entails continuing to hold courageous conversations about race, district-wide, including the board, classified administrative and certificated staff. Every single member of this district has some form of interaction with students, either directly or indirectly, and we must recognize and address implicit bias within ourselves and how that affects curriculum development and policy creation and implementation. If we go to the next slide, staffing. The second focus group is looking at staffing and giving the group the opportunity to examine structures and practices such as representation in the TIPS program and representation of staff members of color in mentoring roles, hire and retain teachers and staff members that reflect the demographics of the student population, evaluate the current hiring and promotion practices within the district that are impeding staff members of color to hold administrative positions. There should be no question that we need more Black and brown representation at the administrative table. If you can please go to the next slide. In order to be more equitable and inclusive, the third focus group would tackle the learning environment, school climate through lifting the voices of students of color in our district, honoring their language and identity. Examine referral and discipline practices that disproportionately affect students of color. For example, looking at the creation of MTSS models and the inclusion of culturally relevant interventions. Next slide. Thank you. Another focus group can look at assessments and grading policies, such as why are students of color disproportionately enrolled in support classes and qualified for special education? How can we overcome imposter syndrome in advanced level courses and support and retain students of color in these courses? Next slide, finally. Focus group can look at curriculum instruction and pedagogy, such as how can we teach culturally relevant curriculum in every subject area and avoid tokenism and window dressing? How can we examine culturally relevant engagement practices? Imagine what it could do to student self-esteem and social emotional growth if the school culture honored the rich diversity in our district, where our students learned about scholars in their community and how they stand on the shoulders of their ancestors and empower them to reach their fullest potential. Thank you. I now pass the baton to my colleague, Elisa Nosadal.
Thank you, Glenda. My name is Elisa Nosadal. I'm a special education teacher at Menlo Atherton High School. I'm going to review the slide that starts with needs for administrators. In order for this work to be successful, we're going to need the support from administration at the district level, as well as the site level. What that would look like from the district level is for the district administrators to act on the recommendation from each site's Equity and Diversity Council. They would also need to report the actions and progress to the board periodically. At the site level, we would need administrative support to allow this council to meet during collaboration time. And we want to make sure that this is not forced upon any members of our staff, that it is voluntary, and it is critical that classified as well as certificated staff join freely, and that there are no ramifications, negative ramifications for anyone for wanting to participate. Next slide, please. The next slide goes into our estimated budget. I don't want to go into too much detail here, but I do want to highlight some things that are important for the public to know, and as well as the board. Again, these are estimates. The 5 members of this design team spent quite a bit of time during the summer. There are suggested reading materials, site council meetings, etc. But the most important thing that I want to highlight here is that we want to have ongoing professional development equity training for our staff. And that obviously costs money, and we want to make sure that the board understands that this is not money that is going to be misspent. It is very important work, and anything of value is going to cost money. As we've mentioned earlier, there is going to be a push for a director of equity and diversity position. And because it is an administrative district level position, we estimated a salary that would go with that. So please take a look at that in your, so you can look at the details of that. Next slide, please. So this next slide talks about the indicators and outcomes, and I would like to remind everyone again that this is a work in progress. It is impossible to write down all of the things that we would like to have come about as a result of this council and the work that we will create. But we have highlighted many things here that we would like to see, from students to staff parents, and the community. One area that we recognize that the design team would like to flesh out even more is the voice of students. We are all adults, we are all staff members. We want to increase their voice at the site level, inside the classroom and outside the classroom. We want them to have a more positive indicators on surveys with their teachers, when they report back home to their families. We want to see a decrease in referrals and suspensions, particularly for our students of color, whom this has always been a big problem. Increase attendance, but more importantly, increase the engagement and the completion so that they can reach whatever goal that they would like to reach post high school. It's extremely important not only that they reach A through G, but also for work experience, for preparation for careers. We want to make sure that they are reaching the goals that they want to reach, regardless of their color, regardless of their socioeconomic background, regardless of the educational level of their parents. We want to support the students' voices here. For staff, we want to increase our teacher recruitment and retention, particularly for our teachers and staff of color. As Pablo mentioned earlier, about 65% of our communities that we serve, our students that we serve, are students of color, and our staff needs to reflect this. We have set goals for certain dates, and we want to make sure that it is happening quickly so that in the next 5 years, we can have an increase that is significant in the number of staff members, particularly certificated, that are members of people of color. We want to have more out-of-the-box hiring practices. We want to improve our morale and wellness. The hiring practices that are currently in place are very questionable and very much affect the morale of our staff of color. And this is a major area that we would like to look into. There needs to be proper training and implementation for all staff, particularly for social justice and restorative justice practices. There are many areas where this can be, we need to improve in this. We claim to be using restorative justice practices, but it is not always effective. It is not always being used the way it should be used. We need to have better training. We need to understand the implicit bias that we all have. We would like 100% of our teachers trained in culturally relevant practices. We need to understand where we are so that we can then improve ourselves and improve the relationships we have with students, and they understand the world that we live in right now and how to overcome things. With the parents and community, again, we need to make sure that our parents who are historically been underrepresented have a voice and are making, have a greater decision-making power, not only at site, but also at district meetings. This is an area that I get very passionate about, because imagine you're sending your child to a school and you feel like your voice is not being heard. You don't know if what the staff is doing is what you want, because you never get to voice your opinion. So we need to really improve in these areas. Greater coordination with local businesses, nonprofits, agencies, just to improve all of these services that need to be provided to people of color and families of color. Parent education programs, focusing on social justice, have to have more frequent offerings and not always be in the same locations, which are sometimes many, many miles away. I understand we're in the middle of a pandemic, but we need to look forward when this is over, and even now, to make sure that the proper interpretation, high quality interpretation, not just in Spanish, but in Tongan and Samoan and all the languages that we might need to provide for our families. Next slide, please. This is the last slide I will review. This is the annual report. We would like to see an annual report reported to the board, and making sure that the public is aware of what's happening at each site level and at the district. We want to make sure there's an accountability report similar to a WASC every year. This is only going to benefit our district, make it stronger. We would like this to be a published report that contains research and baseline data. And I would like to make sure that I pass it along to my next I believe Pablo is going to go over the final part of the slide. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Lisa. So all of that shows that there's a lot of work to be done. And one of the key things that we believe that should happen and we'd like to see is that, like many districts in the Bay Area and all over the country, you're seeing more and more directors of equity and directors of equity and diversity. And we think that this position is something that would be very beneficial in order to help facilitate all of this work. So this position is vital in order to make everything actually function, everything work, from communication to decision-making and organization. So I also want to just make sure that we all know that I know a lot of people, including myself, and I've been very critical about this as well, have always questioned the fact that this district adds a lot of administrative positions in the district office. However, I want us to kind of look at that as something different. All those are independent of this. This position is something that would be incredibly vital for equity and has an incredibly important place in this district. You can move on to the next slide, please. Now, as far as action timelines, what we see here is the next steps going forward. Now, the dates here that you see are stuff that has been adjusted, and it's stuff that obviously we just proposed. This is just a proposal. Now, what we're actually looking at is we wanted to present this to the board, which we're doing right now. This week, the design team has met with all principals, or at least scheduled a meeting that will happen later this week with all school site principals to kind of explain what this could look like. Now, the reason why we wanted to do this is because the fact of the matter is almost every single school in the district has teachers who have organized informally groups working on this equity and diversity and anti-racist work already this summer. These groups have been going on for months. Now, all that's happening. So what we're trying to do is create a structure to connect all these groups and make sure that work can be sustainable going forward. So we met with the site administrators in order for them to kind of see what it is that we envision, because we can then see that they can maybe start working on stuff at the school sites. We know that all over the district, a lot of these things that we're kind of proposing are just things that still need to be hashed out with the appropriate parties. However, the work at the school sites is already happening. So the administrative support in allowing the space and the structure to actually do the school site work is really important. So we met with administrators and we got a lot of support and enthusiasm from administrators to actually work with staff on this. Now, we are also looking to present all of this to staff at convocation on Monday to be able to get into more details and present everything to them so they understand what it is. A lot of staff already knows about a lot of this as we've been in contact with them, but it's just good for everyone to see so they know exactly how they could join in the cause. Now, as far as next steps, we have obviously want people to be representatives in the school sites. So getting that information out and people to be able to put their name in the hat so they can be representatives there. And looking at having the first school site meetings and looking at the first district-wide Equity and Diversity Council meeting sometime in September would be great, because we need to get this work done now, because in this pandemic, the inequities going on are drastic. And if we don't actually do this work now, then it might not get done. So this is just stuff from a timeline that we suggested here. Now, you can go on to the next slide, please. Now, I want to thank everyone for this. I mean, again, the whole point of this is basically just to have everyone understand that this is just a proposal that was created by 5 teachers with the support of hundreds. We did this over the summer. It is a proposal. It's a pretty damn good one. And we think that every single person should consider this type of structure because it's something that we need. We want this to be a pillar in the district. We want this to be something that we can use going forward, and that would be something that is constantly being used in the district for a long time. Now, in order for that to happen, what we're doing is essentially creating a pillar. It's almost like an umbrella in a rainstorm. You're not going to throw away the umbrella just because you're not getting wet in the rainstorm. So we're hoping this is a pillar as well that we just don't get rid of if we achieve true equity. Instead, we keep it going. And what this provides is a way to keep things accountable, because we're all trying to do the work. Schools are doing a lot of the great work. However, we're still coming up short in ways, and we have to be honest about that. So we need some sort of a system to actually address these things. So I'm going to leave this, and we can have some questions, I'm sure, but I'm going to leave this with a valuable quote that I think shows what we're talking about here. Ava DuVernay, the producer and filmmaker. She always said, my truth is that I don't want a chair at the table, or even 3, or even half. I want the table to be rebuilt in my likeness. And that's what this council could do. And again, this is just a proposal. Nothing is set in stone. We have to work with the district. We have to work with the school sites. But it's time that we do that work. So this is the proposal that we're proposing. Obviously, things change. It'll adapt, but that's what we're looking for. So thank you, everyone, for your time.
All right, thank you, Mr. Aguilar, and everybody else for your participation in that presentation. I guess I would turn now to my board colleagues and see.
President Weiner, do you mind if I make a quick comment?
I actually have just
okay.
one second. I have two
Okay.
voices in my
Two
ear
voices.
right now. So let me first hear from, yes, I think that would be appropriate.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so the second voice in my ear, Nicole, is the voice saying, give Nicole a voice. So,
Okay,
so,
I just 30 seconds. I know that.
So Ms. Anderson, the floor is yours.
All right, I appreciate it. Just as a consultant, I just want to give like context and just want to appreciate the group for sharing the details. This is my first time getting to see that presentation as a new consultant. And so I just want to acknowledge, Dr. Stressley for bringing me in and the board for having the vision to really do some intentional work. I'm excited based on what I saw, but also know there's lots of work to be done, some great ideas. And I know easier said than done, but I just want to acknowledge that and recognize kind of the journey that you're on. And so thank you again, Dr. Stressley, for bringing me in. I see I have a phenomenal group of people who put a lot of brain power into this. And so as a consultant, typically coming into districts, a lot of it's kind of starting from scratch, right? And so I just want to acknowledge the group for the grassroots efforts and really look forward to supporting them and also the future council, recognizing the design team has really done some phenomenal work. So I had to say that because as a consultant, I want to make sure that from the community perspective, that we understand, again, this is systemic work. It takes a lot to do this work. I know that there was just kind of a snapshot of what type of work you can do focused on equity, but I am looking forward to the data and all of the hard work that's going to come around presenting to the board the real identification of what the equity gaps are. And you see some of them have already been unearthed, but as a consultant, I look forward to the data that will be available to support your work. And so I just want to acknowledge you all for that work. And again, just thank you for inviting me to be a part of your community to do this together and lock arms with you. It's going to be a journey, but I'm excited for you and just want to thank you again for allowing me to have this space with you as a consultant. So thank you again.
Great, thank you, Nicole. I will say to the members of the design team that after spending a couple of sessions with us, Nicole never said anything about being excited about being surrounded by so much brain power. So you guys are way ahead of us. All right, so the first comment, that's not true. I know, that's true. That's not true. So student trustee Nori is the first comment that I have, followed by trustee Dubois.
So yeah, firstly, I'd like to thank you. The presentation was really informative and I'm really excited. I think this council can do great work. My question was that a lot of the inequity that students of color face in this area and school district isn't necessarily something that like randomly manifests when youth enter high school at Sequoia Union High School District, but rather something that builds up throughout the middle and elementary school level. So is there any like plan to increase engagement or coordination with relevant stakeholders from those groups to have like a more holistic approach in combating this inequity?
I'll fetch that one to say that I think it probably can be framed where Nicole said it's part of the work. When we have an amazing template that these great teachers put in, and a lot of it will inform how to go forward. But as we start adding people to the table, I can see not only adding students and parents at the high school level, but figuring out how we can extend into our partner districts, because you're absolutely right. Kids come already sort of sorted in friend groups, in class levels, and all of our efforts sometimes can't fix that, from a long way off. So we love to figure out how to be virtual K-12 district anytime we can. And this could be a cornerstone of that. So thank you for that question. And I could see the leadership group that we form as inviting partners to that table. Thank you.
Trustee Dubois to be followed by trustee Thompson.
So this is very exciting work. Thank you very much, all of you. So I have some questions, if it's okay, questions for the design team teachers. 2 questions. First question, I'm getting feedback and a little bit of pressure from the community about the topic of ethnic studies. And we do have some work going on already, a really good model at MA, really good model at Carlmont through Karen Ramroth, and maybe some other things are going on. Is this one of the things you guys will be tackling? And it's controversial, of course, at the state level. So if anybody has any thoughts on that.
Can I address that question? So I know at the last board meeting that was brought up as possibly this council could take on that. And this is where, again, I want to stress that this is just a structure for that work to be done. So I know ethnic studies is something that, I mean, Carmel has it, EPA has it, Tide wanted it, but it was shot down. And then, you know, and all these schools are coming in. I know that there's teachers at every school site that independently are actually currently trying to devise curriculum for ethnic studies. And I think that this council could offer, in a sense, ethnic studies would be something, a group would be different. It's got to go through SAC, it has to go through different areas. However, this council could offer support in the sense of provide structure for someone to, during the collaboration time, as a side group that could actually do the work in research and develop curriculum, and while working with all sites across the district. So this is not saying that the council itself is going to do the ethnic studies, because that is separate, but ethnic studies, it has to go through the process, got to go through the right channels. But this council could provide structure to show why it's important and how the work can actually be done.
Thanks. So this next question might be a hard question, but I'm going to go ahead and ask it. Somebody said that we need to be honest, right? Because to really fix it, we really need to look hard at what is not working. And I feel sometimes at our board meetings, we do a lot of patting ourselves on the back, talking about what works, and there might be a reluctance to talk about what is really not working. And so even in our agenda tonight, we're talking about the number of kids that passed last year during the COVID. But the thing, so when I saw that on our agenda, it kind of made me cringe a bit, because the thing most on my mind is the struggle of so many of our kids, the kids that could not get online, stay online, the kids that couldn't get out of bed, the kids that had enormous hardships, right? Again, this might be a really hard question, but if we're being honest, I don't think that looking at kids that passed when we may have been grading really easily, and we may have been really trying to move kids through because of the hardship. So should we be looking at, should we be asking different questions if we're going to really be solving the problem?
I'm not sure if Carrie, you want me to weigh in. I know that I'm kind of have a different role in just being one who's facilitated with you all through this work. I think it goes back again to there's lots of data that's going to have to be collected to be able to answer that question, I think. But I think the reality is, you know, in distance learning is a new phenomenon. So I don't think we have good data, enough data, but I think constantly monitoring those experiences will help to then drive some of the work. And I think that's the hard part about this work, right? Is that you're kind of building the plane while you're flying it, because this is an unprecedented time in education. And so I hope that that helps a little bit around just really staying really centered on, we have to still identify what equity is in our district, but also start looking at what does that actually look like, right? And grading, you know, assessments and all of that is just one of many things. I think it's a hard one. It's a hard way to answer that question and have an exact, you know, like, here's what you do. I think there's still a lot of data to unpack, a lot of stories to hear, and really to disaggregate that data to have the right kind of focus on what do you do next as a governance team, and obviously at all the different levels who impact that. So I just wanted to weigh in on that, because I know that's something that the board has to wrestle with amongst a lot of things. So I appreciate your question and just wanted to just share that perspective.
Can I also just add on to that? So if you think about it, you're asking like if it's deeper than what we are essentially trying to have, and it is deep, and that's why you need these groups to look at these systems, to look at these structures in order to look at it. Because whenever you're looking at equity, true equity, you have to look at the different systems. You can't just look at one little aspect. You have to address everything. I think we see that, right? With in the past when we're doing distance learning, the communities that have the highest rate of COVID happen to be the North Fair Oaks and East Palo Alto communities, which also happen to be the communities that have the most difficult access to the technology that we have. So we have to look at all these things: healthcare, education, access to internet, all this stuff in order to address these things. And again, we don't have, as Nicole mentioned, we don't have that data as much, but what we can do is look at also, maybe we look at data, how many kids that didn't pass would maybe not have even passed even if we were in person because of the teaching, the structures we have in our school system that don't make them feel welcome, don't make them want to get up in the morning to get on that computer to actually access the education online. So it goes deep and it goes a long way, but I just think that we need to start looking at these structures. And if we help those who are most underrepresented, overlooked, the most oppressed, everyone else will benefit. And I think that's the problem, is that we never really actually help the bottom to push up. We always start at the middle and then hope for a couple to make it up, right? So I think that's what we have to look at. And right now is the time that we have to start analyzing these equitable issues and systems, because the gap's just going to widen in the next couple months, which is why we need to start the work, at least at the school sites, next week.
Call upon trustee Thompson, followed by trustee Jack.
Thank you. And thank you, design team, for the report. I found it's thoughtful, it's helpful, and it's important. And so glad that you presented it to the board. I have one question, and then I'll follow that up with 2 or 3 comments. The question is this, and that's whether the design team drew upon successful plans in other school districts. The reason I ask is I think what would be particularly helpful, and one of the next steps, is to be aware of the challenges that come with this and what others have faced in doing it. And presumably, we're not the first to tackle this. That might be a question for Nicole, who may be aware of other districts, but also to the design team, whether you looked at other models that you think are other districts that you think are really doing exemplary work.
You know, I'll let Pablo go, or one of the design team. I can't answer that. I can just answer from the context of the work as a district and some of the challenges. I'll yield to one of them to answer.
All right, so I know Nicole previously has been a director of equity and diversity. And so we are in talks with Nicole directly in order to get more information. And I've got a child, I'm sorry, y'all. And it's the realities of this virtual meetings. And we also have calls into a couple of directors of equity and diversity in Oakland. And I also am talking to the newly elected or the newly hired director of equity at UC Berkeley to get more information about what it would look like. And I believe he previously was at Skyline College. So we definitely have talks to broaden our grasp and understanding about the challenges that we will face.
Right. And to add on to that, I don't want to make it seem like we just developed this over the summer. I mean, did we? Yes, which is like we created this in 2 months, something that should have been created in the past 20, 50 years. But what we also want to make sure is this has been coming for a long time. I have had personally discussions with Taja, with a whole bunch of other people at Woodside and Sequoia when I was a teacher at those schools, that this is kind of something that has been developing over many years with consultations with people in different districts. Like Oakland has an Office of Equity in their entire district. Like, this is something that we have researched, and we're not saying that we know it all. We don't. We have a vision and we have a plan to try to get there, but we're also wanting to basically say, this is what we want to do. We want to put in that work to get there, do more research to tackle those, because we do recognize that there are obstacles, that there are hardships to achieving this. And the number one hardship is anything that's slowing us down or keeping us from actually looking for it as a district. And I think we need to go and find it. And if some people don't have a vision for it and can't see it, then let's try to encourage those that do to actually go and achieve it, because we got to try and keep the status quo, then nothing's ever going to change. And things will be the same as when I was a student and graduated in 2003. from this district. So I think like we actually need to actually do this and do the work and research and get help from others. Nicole's a valuable resource, and the fact that she was the director of equity, like providing valuable input. So I think, again, we have to look and do that research, but like the vision's there, the plan is there, we can definitely achieve it.
And I just, you know, Trustee Thompson, I just want to say, good to see you, by the way. I want to say your question I'd really appreciate, because that's, as a consultant, that's my biggest concern about consulting and supporting clients around this work is you have to go slow to go fast. You hear me say that quite a bit. And the challenges are that this work, you're interrupting a system. So what happens is there are barriers that come, and there's a readiness for this. So that's why I really always caution before doing any type of, you know, big decisions, spending any type of money. One, the governance team has to make sure this is part of your priority, right? So when we talked about recently, you know, creating an equity statement and having that as a lens, then any decision, whether it's hiring an equity director or it's, you know, adopting new curriculum, whatever that is, it has to align with the priorities. And I say that because, as Pablo and Taja mentioned, I had that position. And I love that position. I'm here because of that position. But I also recognize that that position has some barriers too. And if there's no vision for the structure of that position, the priority, actually, if it's not a priority, what will happen typically in those positions is they last a couple of years, the budget gets cut, right? Because this is education. And one of the first things to go is that position, because it has to be a fundamental part of the fabric of that organization. And so I say that, I do want to say there is vision. I'm excited about this because working with you as a board and knowing your vision, knowing Dr. Streschley's vision, you know, kind of setting that foundation for this work. So I'm excited about the work that was presented tonight and know that it may not happen as fast as we all wanted to, but I think strategically, you can absolutely anticipate something like hiring someone to hold the work is really important. But honestly, everyone has to be an equity leader, right? Everyone has to hold this work. And it has to be really, you know, a critical focus. And lastly, I'll say the barriers to answer your question. Anytime you're trying to advocate and change a system, there are going to be lots of pushback. And the pushback is not a bad thing. It's just you're trying to ask people to change. And part of the barriers to equity work, in particular racial equity work, is the resistance to change. And we have to meet people where they are. So that pace of the work has to go based on the readiness of the organization. If you go too fast or you go too slow, then you find there's pushback either way. And so finding that common ground and being okay with conflict is where the work is going to really last. So working through the conflict. Every district right now in America has a conflict around addressing institutional racism and dealing with COVID-19. I'm going to say it again, addressing institutional racism, dealing with COVID-19, a pandemic, both of them unprecedented in educational system. So if you don't recognize all that's going on right now, you know, you got to almost stop and take a deep breath and go, okay, are we ready for the conflicts that come? But embrace that as growth, that there's good things happening. And so, but it's being strategic. It's not being led by emotion. It's being led by data. It's being led by research. It's being led by really understanding how to meet people where they are. There's lots of relationships that still have to be cultivated. There's lots of voices like Trustee Nori. I just appreciate your perspective, you know, profound, that our babies' voices aren't at the table yet, right? They're not part of every decision. And so we have to make sure that that is something that drives every bit of this work, or else we'll be totally misguided. And about 2 years later, you know, I'm going to come back and go, how's it going, right? What progress have we made? And we may not have the progress we want. So we want to make small wins, right? There's small wins happening right now. Super excited again and honored to be a part of, you know, this work with you in history. But, you know, Trustee Thompson, I just appreciate what you said. Anticipating the barriers is a great question that the board will always have to keep in mind, because you are the governance team who holds the vision, and you have to really guide kind of how that happens throughout. And so again, Dr. Streschley, just thank you again for the time. I'm going to yield back to President Weiner, because I've taken probably way more time than we planned, but this rich discussion with the board, with the design team, I think is powerful and really will help set, you know, some work kind of vision ahead. So I appreciate that as well, knowing what support is needed for your district. So thank you again.
Chris, you mentioned a question and some comments. Do you have additional
Sure,
comments?
I'll be very quick on them. And they're really gut reactions more than anything else. 3 of them. Interesting that Nicole talked about the staff position. You know, at least on the surface, it makes a lot of sense to me that you can't lead all this work without having a dedicated person to it. But then for me, there's going to be details on the job description itself, the position within the organization. Obviously, you want them to have authority, but how's that authority going to take place? So it's in the details. So one on the staff position, the other was to say just an immediate positive reaction to the annual report that I think is going to be immensely helpful to us in terms of accountability. I love that idea. And the final thing, final observation I wanted to make was, it seemed to me that this is an issue that's relatively easy at the board level, because I think you're going to find strong support for the principles, the kind of what we need to do. And it's really in the how it gets done. It's in the work of the administrators and the teaching staff that's really the challenge. And I guess I hope I can be helpful to you all in that process. So that's it.
Thank you, Chris. Trustee Jack, followed by Trustee Sarver.
Hi, thank you. And thank you, committee. I really appreciate the work, because to me, you are singing my song. And I feel like the tiny things, and I will say the tiny things that I have been able to help get going in this district, between getting our board to start going to school sites to meet with students so that we can hear directly from them and to hear from faculty, and getting the discipline committee, which has over time has turned into some other things, but really has examined some of the issues around overrepresentation of our brown and black kids in the discipline system. You guys, you know, you need that whole vision. You need the people, everybody working on this. And so I am so excited about what you're proposing. This is exactly what I think we need to be doing. And I want to say that both Nicole and Pablo said a couple of things that really hit me, specifically about the things that keep me up at night. And right now it's about the gap that is happening as we speak, and what we need to do to get that gap closed. And it is terrifying to me, thinking about what we need to do. We've got to get out there. We need to be brave and courageous and get that done. And my measure, I'd say that, you know, there's lots of measures, but one thing that I'd like to say, and not to offend anybody in this room, I would like to not hear what I heard at a graduation this year from at least 4 boys who said, and they were all of color, "This is for all the teachers who told me I'd fail." That's my measure. Get rid of that and bless you. I think my only question is, because this is so important right now, and that is an ambitious timeline, and to what Nicole was just talking about in terms of bringing everybody along so that it's not just a Band-Aid, it's an actual systemic change. My question is, can you see yourselves really digging in for that long haul? And I know you all have been working on it. I know that, as Pablo alluded to, this is work that's been going on, and all you're doing is really bringing it up and placing it front and center. But it is a long, hard slog. And I say that as someone who's been working, trying to address some of these issues in Redwood City for 20 years. And so I cede the floor back, and I hope that someone can at least talk a little bit about sort of that perseverance to the vision.
Reactions from members of the committee? Or rather, the team?
I'll reply to that. Thank you, Trustee Jack. We're in this for the long haul, and we can't waste time anymore. The comment that you made of the four young men that stated that at their graduation, we can't go back. And so we spent the summer working on this design, and just wanted to reiterate that we created this. Districts have their, they have different ways of handling this, but we created this framework based on our experience as counselors and teachers, and data that we know that exists in the district, and anti-racist work. So we're definitely in this for the long haul, but we need the support of our administration, and we need more people at the school sites to be able to do this work, because we can't do this work alone. But it might seem like we are moving fast, but we have to move fast, because there are children that are struggling, that are suffering in our district, and staff members of color that are really struggling in this district. So we are definitely in this for the long haul.
Thank you, Trustee Sarver.
Yeah, so first of all, I want to begin by thanking you for the presentation, and much more so for the hard work underlying it, and the strength and courage to come forward and start making this happen. This is also, it's part of the curse of being slow to get my little blue hand up, and there's been so much positive that's been expressed already. There was nothing in your presentation that is not in alignment with the core goals and discussions and vision that the board has been putting forward. And the difference is in the clear results that have been coming. The progress that we see in the district is always too incremental, too slow. You can get a sense of trying to point in the right direction, trying to move in the right direction, but really getting there measurably is where the big challenge keeps lying. And one of the big things that is right from the starting point is you have brought to us already 250 voices from across the district, confirming how important it is to be focused on this work and to be moving forward and making it happen. You have begun outlining structures in which we can engage the right army under the right leadership to be putting this front and center and making it happen. You talked about others who might have signed, but for a fear of retaliation. And we can talk now about there is not retaliation to fear from within the district leadership. There is support to be found. There is opportunity to do this. And with head shaking coming back, Pablo, we want to listen. We want to get this done. And we want to explore where there is still sense of pushback and resistance, and forward and move it forward. Student Trustee Nori, your question about engaging the feeder level of schools and the community that's coming to us is a great point. And I think there's so much more in the broader community that we need to engage as part of this too. We need to be looking for the ways where the schools can be leading and bringing in partners, and how we can be leaning on the partners in the outside community to help break down more of the barriers that are there as well. But this is really a strong opportunity for us to be going after the systemic structures within our district that we can change and do something about and make it go forward. So I want us to be looking for what are the impediments, what are the decisions we need to make right away to make sure that we can launch this and get the momentum going during this most critical year and this most critical start of the most unusual year, and make this be happening. So I've got nothing but thanks and praise for this work.
Thanks, Trustee Sarver. That seemed more like a comment than a question. So unless members of the design team want to respond, I'll go on to the next person on the list, who's me, and my little blue hand was raised last. So I have probably the least to say. I will echo the thanks for the presentation, for all the hard work. I'll just talk about one topic that's near to my heart, as Bonnie Hansen knows. She's on the second row of my screen here. I have been sort of agitating in this district for a long time about the role of ethnic studies curriculum. I was drawn to this originally because of the very powerful research that I had seen about academic outcomes, right? That when students were enrolled in academic studies classes, they not only did well in those classes, but having seen themselves as agents of worthy of study, they did better in other classes as well. And so, you know, we have asked the superintendent to begin thinking about this issue of ethnic studies curriculum. And in fact, what I'm hoping that we will do is move towards the adoption of a mandatory ethnic studies requirement that all students would take. Now, your slide on curriculum, I think, Elisa, were you the one who presented this? No, who presented the curriculum? It basically, I think the language was ethnic studies would be embedded in all classes in structure. And so one of the questions that I hope we'll be thinking about is if there is to be a commitment to ethnic studies in this district, which of those approaches is better? Embedding it in all curriculum, where how effectively it's actually embedded or delivered will vary from class to class, or having unique and a dedicated course offering. You know, this was an issue that we struggled with in legal education about the role of ethics, right? Should ethics be taught in all classes because lawyers are supposed to be ethical? And so whenever you're dealing with an issue of contracts or an issue of torts, you have to deal with ethical problems. Or should there be a dedicated course on legal ethics? And the academy has gone back and forth. So I'm not expecting an answer to that. And as you observed, Mr. Aguilera, this is an issue that is not really for this design team to decide. There's a different pathway for the district to deal with issues of curriculum. But I think that's an important question. I would certainly hope that we'll be engaging around that question as we think about ethnic studies curriculum.
Can I just clarify something that you just mentioned about the presentation? You said that ethnic studies would be embedded in all the courses, or if it should be an approach of just a single course?
No, I'm just reading the language that was on your slide, right? And that to me suggested that that was the preferred approach.
No. What that slide was mentioning is there's two different things. The ethnic studies separate can be its own standalone course, but what that means is that every single course can take on some sort of ethnic studies type of spirit and curriculum. That if you're learning in science, you should be, for example, if the environmental science class should be learning about environmental racism and the effect on current communities and historically. Like there's ways for every single class to take in some of the spirit and some of the curriculum, but that separate standalone class can be different.
So it could be a both. So it could be a both. It could be a both and rather than an either or.
And that, and then to your question about the ethnic studies and just the development and why it has to go through appropriate channels, but why looking at everything else and how everything affects is an interesting part is if we have the ethnic studies being developed in the district, the question is, well, who is creating this ethnic studies curriculum? And what happens if the ethnic studies curriculum is created by a majority white teachers? Right? So it's like, shouldn't the people in the communities have an opportunity to do that? But if the structures of the school district don't fix the teaching representation, then we have to be careful with ethnic studies as well. And there's so much more to it. So that's why the structures that the council can do and provide can allow for all these different angles to be analyzed in order to have a better outcome. But I agree with you on everything. I just wanted to clarify those quick points.
All right, thank you. So if there's nothing further, this has been an extended, although only first part of this conversation. So again, would like to reiterate the thanks expressed by my colleagues for the hard work and the presentation. And I think you have heard that you have a board that is quite eager to continue this work and to continue engaging as the district moves forward. So I think then that will finish that agenda item. And we come now to item 14.1, which is an update on COVID-19. I anticipate that this will actually be well, let's go ahead and do this item, and then perhaps we can consider taking a short break. But let's go ahead and move on to our discussion item 14.1. And I turn the podium over to Dr. Streschley.
Thank you, President Weiner. I was very enthused also to see and hear the presentation by the group. I had advanced preview of the slides as well as conversations with the teachers, but seeing a lot of the things put together is just very stimulating, and thank you very much. Moving to our COVID update. We've had many, and there will be many more. We're just getting ready to open school, and we're getting ready to have the management camp tomorrow. And it just is a reminder that absolutely recreating almost every aspect of high school is a grind. And so we'll have a good amount of information tonight. We'll I'll do an overview of the watch list and some of the testing requirements that's come out of the state and those implications. We'll hear more about safety and technology. We'll hear about attendance and engagement requirements. We'll hear about our amazing PD week next week and the ongoing support we want to provide. And we'll also hear about some of our outcomes of our recent negotiations, which will have a wonderful impact on student learning. So before I launch into the technicalities of COVID, I want to take this time to remark on all the impact that COVID has had on our lives, and how my leadership has had impact. So tonight I want to make sure that I acknowledge the hard work of the teachers that they've done throughout the summer to create the high quality, engaging courses and content for students this fall, and to recognize the hurt feelings I caused in several instances, but probably initially by choosing not to respond to public comment disparaging our teaching staff on June 4th board meeting. Although I did not vocalize any comments in that moment, because I do believe parents needed a venue to express how they feel, because they had not had the really opportunity to do so to then. Having said that, the pervasive feeling was and is that I did not support teachers. And for that, I want to take this moment to publicly apologize. I've had several conversations with teachers who have approached me. I've talked to Edith and listened to her and the concerns for her members. And I've read lots and lots of thoughtful emails about the progression and the feelings. As years of teaching has taught me, I do know that the commitment our teachers make each and every day to the classroom. They're driven by the idea that they can change lives and improve communities through their work. That's why I believe this work of the Equity and Diversity Council is timely, but I think we have a ready and willing and very talented audience. It's still going to be hard, but I think we have the people to see this through. I'm eternally grateful to them for their dedication to our students. I don't believe a lot of districts are actually in the place that we are. We're all in various stages, but there is a readiness to get this work started. And I want to thank everybody for that work. I want to say again, if my actions, words, or lack thereof were interpreted as otherwise, I am again wholeheartedly apologetic and still ready to continue listening. I do firmly believe that there's still more we can do to support our parents and students during this time, and I'm committed to finding these solutions, safe solutions. I will not turn my back on them, and I will not turn my back on the people of Sequoia, teachers, staff, and our management team. the experience over the summer of building a path towards opening the school and trying to keep it aligned to the state guidelines, 100% online, hybrid or otherwise, has been absolutely arduous and at times agonizing. I want to honor the work of our management team, the support staff, and our teacher leadership who committed to work. I think you just said 44 days. It feels like more. I think they probably feel like more as well. No, it was 44 hours, excuse me, and made it possible. The never give up attitude showed resilience of all of our leaders. So I have more to say, but I want to get to the work, and I'll have other opportunities. But I do want to say that given the gravity of the moment, my urgent hope is we can work together to find a path forward. And my humble promise is that I will take all measures possible to help heal the harm and earn the trust necessary to make this happen. So the areas I will update before I turn it over to our talented team is a couple of things happened once again in the last week or so. As of 12:01 a.m. on Saturday, August 1st, our county was placed officially on the state's monitoring list, and additional activity restrictions have been applied to the county. I'm just going to run through some of the facts surrounding schools. We are not in shelter in place as we're around to move around the community, and some businesses are able to function. The governor has prohibited middle schools and high schools and counties on the monitoring list from in-person instruction until the county is off the monitoring list for 14 consecutive days. Elementary schools may open, however, they would require a waiver to do so. This order does not apply to preschools or childcare operations. It also allows teachers and meet other needs of students in schools. Education is still considered an essential service. Campuses may remain open to serve specialized needs with students. An example in our region, communities are developing small group learning spaces through libraries and rec centers. I believe Trustee Jack has been an advocate of that. And therefore San Mateo County is exploring that option in a pretty substantial way. The Bay Area County superintendents would like to see these learning hubs to be allowed on our school campuses with credentialed and school district employees. So far, we have a thumbs up from our local health officials, and the governor is also considering an exemption allowing students with special needs to receive services and instruction in person. But this, once again, is still in talks, so we'll wait any forthcoming on that. Just yesterday, August 4th, we learned that the state would be forthcoming with additional guidance on students meeting in one-to-one or small group settings for targeted services and academic support. In our last report, we talked to parents and in the town hall meetings about the targeted services and academic support that we would like to provide students on campus. And I would like to give really clear direction to our sites on which programs would fit. And I'm hoping this forthcoming guidance will come soon. I think it should come in the next few days. Our sites are working on learning hubs. Several of the high school districts, including San Mateo, are doing this also. And so probably in the next week, in the first week of school, they'll establish students' needs and see what the need is for these hubs to access internet in a good learning environment. And soon, Crystal will also provide an update on the expanded Wi-Fi access to more expansive parts of our comprehensive campuses, as well as potential partnerships for community access. Jarrett will give us probably more information either tonight or a few days from now. But with regard to sports, although CIF made the official announcement that fall sports would be delayed and become winter sports, we would like to offer the fall conditioning similar to what we did over the summer. We will likely, as we consider this, and several superintendents were considering this in tandem, would likely delay the start of it a few weeks, possibly to beginning of September or mid-September, in anticipation of the forthcoming guidance and assurances on small group activities. So the next piece of information that came out in the governor's guidance is a testing requirement. And so we reported last time that part of a reopening, if you were closed based on the watch list, was putting a testing system in place. So our district will need to start this. We've started some preliminary exploration. So one big question and a clarification is that this is really for when we're off the watch list and we're reopening to in-person instruction. However, if we have the small group, one-to-one, some access on campus, we'll want to develop the system to be able to provide for that as well. So the one consideration is who should be tested and how often. It's really all of our essential workers, from teachers to paraprofessionals, cafeteria workers, janitors, bus drivers, etc. And it's general. It says staff will be tested periodically as testing capacity permits and as practicable. So we have some latitude. An example could be that it's over 2 months, we would get 25%. Or 50% on a rotating basis. So along with that, and I'll be working with Dr. McAvoy and the county office. They're recommending that we reach out to our district medical providers, the insurance providers, and the providers should be supporting testing as requested by staff. This is deemed the fastest and most efficient way to do testing right this minute. However, the county office is taking the lead in doing a piggyback contract with a list of private vendors. This contract would be shaped to include all the school districts in the county. Because the governor has stated that the school districts should not be spending COVID funds on testing and should be utilizing health providers and insurance to access this private testing as on a as needed basis, I'm recommending we identify funds that could cover employee testing in cases where we need to get things up and going right away. So I will go ahead and pass the baton unless we want to pause and ask questions about basically testing or our watch list.
Let's proceed with the presentation.
Okay.
And then I hope board members have long enough memories, despite our collective advanced age, that we can remember questions that we want to ask at the end of the presentation. And again, for members of the public, if there is a request to comment on this after staff presentation, that would be the point at which I would open things up for public comment on this item if there is public comment on this issue. So it is over to now Mary Whom.
Excellent. We will take it over to our business office. Crystal.
Good evening. Okay, so a few updates. Most of the updates are the same as what has been given at the last few meetings. So just kind of a reminder, and then a little bit of some new information. So all of the PPE have been palletized and delivered to all of the sites. I'm sure that they are busy unpacking them and getting them set up so that we can go ahead and allocate and make sure that we have proper placement for all staff that may be returning. We are still working through what I am referring to as the air circulation, which is also known, the main portion of that is the air exchange that happens in the room and in hallways at all of our sites. So we are still in the testing phase of that. So I hope within a week or so, we have some rooms with mock-ups that we can perform these tests in, so that we'll be able to measure the amount of air exchange within these classrooms and just hallways in general around all of the school sites. As far as technology goes, yes, our connectivity will look very different than it did in the spring. We have secured hotspots with several providers, as well as upped the amount of gigs that each hotspot will have. So we won't have some of those same challenges that we had in the springtime with Zoom or certain assignments burning through gigs. We also are finishing up some paperwork with Comcast as far as a district sponsorship for some of our students that would qualify for direct connection of Comcast internet in their home. The county has decided fairly recently, really just within the last week or so, to do the initiative for a Wi-Fi initiative for the North Fair Oaks area that will also serve some of our students. It's still unclear to me how that's advertised to our families, so I'm trying to get some more information so we can share that out. The ETA on probably that equipment being up and running and service to our families is probably around 2 months. Sites are gearing up to start issuing devices. Some of them have already done so. And, so I really do see technology in the fall looking very different than it did in the springtime. Our COVID funds are what's using to push a lot of this out and make a lot of this happen. And so with that, requires, because it's federal dollars, so you have to be able to track and be able to verify the participation and so forth. So, but it's exciting. So, and also with those technologies, also to look at the needs of teachers and where they're teaching as well, so that we can make sure, the goal is to make sure that all students and staff have the appropriate tools so that we can really knock this distance teaching and learning out of the park in the fall.
All right, I think that's me. I'm next.
Yeah, Mr. Dooley.
It's okay. Thank you, Crystal. Appreciate the brief opportunity to give an update on student attendance and engagement plan as we enter the fall, and welcome back students and staff virtually. And so first I want to start with just giving a shout out to our miniature team who last minute came together on Monday to have a great conversation. We went way over our allotted time, but I appreciated everyone sticking with it. And that's Rebecca, Edith, Laura, Rob, Hi, Ken, Alvaro, Jackie, Chris, and Gregory. We had a great conversation, lots of Q&A, and that was the whole point of talking through our draft of an attendance and engagement plan is, poke holes in it. Let's figure out how we can improve, especially involving our teaching staff and our union members to really have their eyes on it, because essentially the classroom teachers are the ones starting all of the attendance and engagement work by taking attendance. And so just real quick as an update, with changes to education code under Senate Bill 98, we are required to do 3 things based upon being in distance learning as a district. Those 3 things are: 1, to take attendance / engagement or participation; 2, utilize that information to create weekly engagement records, which note students' participation in synchronous and asynchronous learning, as well as documenting participation and engagement and tracking student assignments. We are also, as part of that provision of Ed Code, required to as usual, communicate with parents and guardians on student attendance. And so that's part of that engagement record as well. And then in number 3, we are also required to develop tiered re-engagement strategies for students that are absent for more than 3 school days or 60% of the instruction for the week. So those are 3 big requirements that are all tied together. And so what student services team was able to put together was a pretty detailed draft outlining a lot of those components. And we are still working through some of the very big questions that were brought up in our group on Monday. We discussed quite a bit today. We will be discussing further tomorrow, and we hope to have a final draft of that plan out internally and then eventually externally in our communication to the community as well as our teaching staff, and figuring out how we have a solution to actually taking attendance and monitoring asynchronous and synchronous learning within our student data management system. That's still that last piece, and how teachers are actually going to take that attendance. We are still working through that with our SIS, and Ken has been a big help in that world on the information services side. And so lots still happening. This is our number 1 priority, as we have said repeatedly. You know, school is starting right around the corner, and we're committed to not piling on for our teachers, trying to make things as simple and streamlined as possible. And our promise to them that we are really still trying to deliver on is, if they can make the promise to uphold timely and accurate attendance while taking a look at student participation and engagement, that we are making a real concerted push to automate our weekly engagement records for students. And so that's still trying to be finalized on the back end and how we do that with the data. So that is our update on attendance and engagement, but know that we will be taking the intervention and re-engagement plans to our sites with some guidance from the district to develop kind of a miniature site plan on how students that are disengaged or quote unquote absent according to the state, how we have them follow our 3 levels of interventions based upon their absenteeism. And we are still working as well on updating. We're no longer going after the typical truancy. We're modifying our communication on the absenteeism to focus on re-engagement, providing resources, providing information in families' home language on how to engage in Canvas, context and supports for mental health and wellness, et cetera. So a lot happening in this world, but we're getting close to coming to a final draft on this. So thank you.
All right. Good evening, trustees, and I'll pick it up from here and share my screen to review some of the work that teachers will be engaging in next week in preparation for students' arrival, and continued preparation, I should say, for students' arrival. And what's going to be important, you have this flyer, but you're busy people, so I'll point out some key highlights here, trustees, that I think are worth paying attention to. And one of the things that's key to highlight here is not just the dizzying, stunning array of excellent choices for teachers, but really more what's important about it is the focus that it reflects around some of our beliefs about the most important things that are components for distance learning, for quality distance learning. Another key thing that it reflects is the all hands on deck contribution of so many teachers who reached out to lend a hand, to pitch in, to share their input and their their insight, their wishes for professional learning, in some cases their complaints about professional learning, and all of it I think has made this week better, as well as site administrators who came to help plan it and with me prioritize all of the needs for next week that include, you know, site course teams having time to work together, some of the logistics that they'll need to work with their staff on, and just how school is going to work, et cetera, along with a desire for continued professional growth that's around focus areas. So I'll scroll down and point out some key things that I think will be important to you. And throughout, one of the things that I hope you'll notice is that student, teacher, and parent voice is represented throughout the week. And that is one of the things that excites me most. So essentially what teachers will do is they'll come together for professional learning that's sort of part of everybody's schedule, common 4 days of the week for an hour and a half, and then they'll have options for many, many more opportunities throughout the week that will be in addition to their collaboration time and site meeting time, and in addition to their prep for their classes. On Monday, our area of focus is, again, and these areas of focus are reflecting some of the most key things in quality distance learning. It's around planning for access. So how you set up your classes to make sure that all students can come in and access the content and material and be successful. Our second day's focus is around engaging our class community in blended and online instruction. And like the flyer notes, it is a very different thing in online learning, but it begins in the same way that it does in the in-person classroom, in creating a safe environment and building relationships. And then it continues with rooting our instruction in what's rigorous and real life. So that is absolutely reflected on that day. And one of the key highlights there is a student panel that I'm super excited about. On Wednesday, the area of focus is around authentic assignments and assessments, and how we continue essentially what's been the focus of our department for many years, which is the shift away from instruction that's DOK1 and road and knowledge-based, and continuing the shift towards what's relevant and real life and based in application and problem solving. And at the risk of sounding overly positive and optimistic, I think that we're going to see growth through this period of time in this area that we won't come back from. And I'm very excited about that. And that also relates to our next area of focus on Thursday, which is around anti-racism and equity. And again, I want to say it again, that it was conversations with teachers who have begun the conversations and invested and committed to learning and growth themselves that have inspired this. And some key things there, a parent panel will, I think, be a great focus. I got requests from teachers to tap into experts in the area of anti-racism and equity, and that's what we've done. We've gotten external experts to help us out through this, and I was helped quite a bit by Charlene Margot, who helped me plan a couple sessions, and that was wonderful, and I'm grateful to her. Along with grateful to all of the teachers who contributed, or all of the people who contributed. I do want to say, and I said it before, but it bears repeating, and I want to tie back to the presentation from the Equity and Diversity Steering Committee, or excuse me, Design Committee, that again, this represents step one of their equity and action protocol, the learning and understanding step, but it certainly isn't everything. And there's steps 2, 3, and 4, in which we identify racialized disparities and identify the policies and practices that lead to them and root them out and change them. So that said, I'm very excited about our focus on anti-racism and equity. I know that every administrator is excited to participate alongside the teachers in this learning. And I wholeheartedly invite the trustees to join us as well. I wish I could thank every teacher who's been a part of this creation, because I think it's really one of the best collections of PD that we've had since I've been doing it, which isn't all that long, but and that's because of all of their input. Of course, my team is in the midst of, sorry, let me say one more thing. There's also going to be a whole bunch of optional PD around tech tools that I neglected to mention last time, and I'm going to reinforce this time. All of the things that teachers need to make the what, above listed what happen. And one big complaint I have is that there are just too many good choices. So it turns out that we're already engaged in a week of professional development right now. So if teachers wanted more choices, they have them over a 2-week period. And the instructional coaches are in the midst, instructional coaches and coordinators in the PD and curriculum department are in the midst of 2 weeks straight of PD. So thank you for the opportunity to share that, and I'm excited to see you there.
Good evening. I believe that I'm next to frame for you some of the things that we've been working on in our side letter with SDTA and also in our consults. And I'd like to echo what's been said a number of times this evening, and that's the dedication of the group, both the negotiations team from SDTA and also our team, Diane, Kristen, and Sean. We saw people Zooming from their cars. We saw them Zooming from their vacations. We saw them Zooming in their living rooms and their kitchens, and they were there and engaged. And it was really, I think, productive work, even though it did take quite some time. In our side letter, initially, we were looking at, as you know, a hybrid model, and then we shifted to focusing on distance learning in our side letter. And we have, in the side letter, we have agreements on the health and safety protocols. We also have agreements on the distance learning model. And we looked at 6 areas: assessment and student expectations, curriculum content and scheduling, accountability, evaluation, and attendance, equipment, training, and technical support, communication, collaboration, privacy, and security, and then special ed and non-classroom support. And it is a very comprehensive side letter. We also have, and you heard a little bit about the attendance piece from Jared, we have 3 consult groups that have been meeting in parallel. One is the attendance and engagement group that Jared has been working with to make sure that we have in place things that are not only compliant with law and SB 98, but are also practical for our teachers and for our students. We have, Victoria has been working on the expectations for distance teaching. What are the expectations that we have both for our teachers and both for our students to ensure that every student has access to 240 minutes of instruction per day, both synchronous and asynchronous. And then the last is, as you know, we looked at a schedule where we have asynchronous instruction on Wednesdays, and it provides teachers with the opportunity for professional development, for looking at their planning for the week. And Bonnie Hansen was working on what does that schedule look like for accountability for teachers on Wednesdays. So when those 3 consult groups are done, those will be attached to the side letter. And what we hope to have out probably by Monday to the sites will be the bullet points of those expectations, because what we would like to do is have the sites and the district share those with our parents and with our students and with our teachers and staff, so that everybody understands the frame for expectations for distance learning. We are very concerned, and you've heard this from board members and from teachers and from administrators, about whether or not our students will have access to the internet and what that looks like. And so that's part of the engagement piece that we really need to, within the first week, identify where there are going to be issues with connecting to the internet, what kinds of devices that students will be using, so that we can make modifications in our plan so that they can access the curriculum and instruction. So again, kudos to SDTA's team and to our negotiations team. It was really a long haul with a lot of discussion, and I think it was really worthwhile. It is going to continue because our next phase will be talking about circling back and talking about when we move into a hybrid model, what is that going to look like? But that will build on what we've learned from all of the work that we've done on distance learning. And so again, it's something where we're moving forward, and the lessons that we learn now are probably lessons that we will be applying in the future, even when all this is over. Thank you.
Is there another presentation in this smooth, seamless web that you have woven? I just don't know who will be the next voice, who will speak next. Okay, wonderful. So I don't see comment. So let's go. Well, I see comment, not public comment, but from Ms. Salvatore. So Edith, over to you.
I just wanted to comment, in addition, as I think Dr. McAvoy and some of the other presenters, especially Jarrett, commented, in addition to bargaining, SDTA in the last week has had extensive consultation around attendance. And I think we're looking for another date to keep that conversation going around what the expectations and best practices for synchronous instruction and thoughts around asynchronous instruction and how we're going to structure those Wednesdays so that we can support students, comply with SB 98, and do all the PD and planning and collaborating that we're going to need to be able to get our support to students in a meaningful way. It's been a lot of work, and it's really coming down to the wire. And we're hoping that we can get all of that out to folks so that they can feel confident the first day of school with their real students virtually in front of them. It has not been easy, and it has not been a summer that is to the extent that any of us have ever experienced it. And to use the words of one of my members who shared with me today, I'm burnt out already, and students haven't shown up yet. So I think we're going to have to continue to pull together to do some restorative work so that we can replenish ourselves and be able to do the work moving forward. But I've also really appreciated working with Crystal over the last couple of weeks as she's taken the ventilation more seriously than anybody I've ever spoken to about ventilation. And we both are hopeful that in focusing on keeping the air exchange going and the airflow moving, to protect anyone in those rooms from any particles that might be there, that will have some unintended benefits, that we might have some fresher air and nicer smelling classrooms in the future. So thanks to Crystal as well.
Thank you, Edith. The first board member I have is Georgia, followed by Satvik.
Great. Well, I want to, first of all, echo Edith in that I don't think anyone's had a summer. Today I wrote, I dated something July 4th. So just saying, like, that's where I'm at. And I want to thank
in the corporate world, backdating is discouraged. So
trust me, I was like, oh, geez. But I want to thank all the teachers. This has just been, I'm not going to say the horrible phrase we're all used to hearing, but honestly, this is insanity. And I truly, truly, truly appreciate all the hard work everybody has put into moving everything forward. It is I can't think of a good word beyond unprecedented, and it's so trite at this point, but I do thank you so much. But I do have two questions, and they're really about my two favorite topics at the moment. One is the county program. So hopefully I can get a little bit more information. So the county, and what we're talking about is San Mateo County and the unincorporated parts of our district, which is primarily North Fair Oaks, and the infamous internet desert that is out there. I mean, that's really what it is. So this when I last heard about the county, they were talking about putting in for, and I'm going to get the number incorrect undoubtedly, so someone can correct me. I wanted to say it was like $3 million for Wi-Fi connectivity. And then there was going to be additional costs for the associated school districts, for Redwood City School District, our school district, and the community college district, and a lock-in for 10 years on that service. Is that still the situation, or is it now that the county is basically taking that on?
Do you want me to answer, Mary? Or?
I'll just say that it's from the, and then I'll let Crystal take the real meat. It's, I believe it's 1.3 million that they were pledging to add 3 different hours. And I keep muting myself. $1.3 million for 3 towers in different areas of North Fair Oaks. And the ongoing costs, they wanted school districts to take on for a lengthy commitment, about 10 years, around $350,000 a year is one of the proposals, I believe. Crystal, you want to?
Yes, that's really for the maintenance. So the good thing is that if we were to come to an agreement on the cost of maintenance, that there are 2 other districts at that table, and one of them has some fairly large coffers. So we will definitely be examining how they would be able to participate in any cost to maintenance. The report that was shared with me, I was a little underwhelmed about how many families it was actually serving for the price point, to be honest. And I'm not clear on how they advertise to our families, because they already have some of these towers throughout the county. So those are still kind of some of the devil in the details that I'm trying to figure out. But they are moving forward with the installation. They're calling it as a pilot. They also are doing a pilot in East Palo Alto and then La Honda Pescadero.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I guess when that is moving on, or when there's an opportunity to talk more in depth about it, I do have questions and concerns around the security of that kind of a public Wi-Fi with the word public in it. And also the fact that 5G, when that comes out, which should be within the next 24 months, pretty much means that we don't need Wi-Fi towers anymore. And that's a whole different topic. And anyone who's on this call who wants to discuss 5G, feel free to contact me. My other question, testing, and by that I mean the actual, disease testing. So I'm wondering, is the county taking the lead in really talking about how we're going to operationalize testing through essential service workers, how quickly we're going to get test results back to people? I'm just going to say my husband had to go take a COVID test this week because he's having surgery, and he was told 72-hour turnaround for a surgery scheduled the same week. Also, he got his test results back and he was told, but these test results may not actually be accurate and only good for the day you took the test. So, I'm a little sketchy on the testing. So there's that component of it. And then there's this idea around, operationalizing testing across a county with many school districts all vying for tests. Are we going to be like states, battling it out for PPE, or is the county going to step in and help come up with testing places, testing mobility, again, the turnaround on the test, agreement to the test, so we're all taking the same test. I have a ton of questions about this because I feel like it's easy to say testing and it's totally different to do the testing.
Your last statement, Trustee Jack, is where we are, because the well-intentioned idea of having schools test to keep everybody safe, but there's really been, they've provided nothing. The state has not made any indication that they're going to increase testing capacity. If they do, we don't know when. Our local health department has said they can provide zero assistance for testing. And so as I explained in a thin explanation of testing, is that right now they say, go to your own health providers. The county will help with private vendors, but right now our own health providers, as I think some people already know, it could take a while, and some of them don't maybe test if you don't have symptoms. And so they either want you to have had a contact with a case or having symptoms. And so there are providers, I believe Kaiser is saying that they will test, but right now it's not a 72-hour. It's probably 4 or 5 days to get in, and then another 4 or 5, 6 days to get the results. We've gotten a flyer from Stanford Hospital, which seems to be the hospital with the largest testing capacity right now. I'm not sure how they got it, but they've committed to test everybody, and they would just charge a health provider. And their turnover is right now faster. It's 42, 72 hours, 48 or 72 hours. But as you just predicted, I think unless the testing capacity is significant, we're going to have a glut again if we put all of our essential worker employees on a cycle throughout the whole county, in order, as well as battling with the whole county and just the public. But we do have to put a plan in place. But we're hoping as we put the plan in place, once again, we'll have to go to plan B because we'll have more information and then hopefully more support in the implementation. So we'll be doing that over the next week or so. And the price point is also something that they don't want us to use COVID funds for. They hope that the insurance providers will pay. If not, we need to identify our own sources if we want to use the contracted vendors that the county office is working on developing. So there's a lot of holes, it's porous. And so it could be the biggest hoop to opening. But I think we can put a plan in place to get, to start getting cycles of staff through in the next couple of weeks.
Thanks, Trustee Nori.
Yeah, so I also wanted to echo all the hard work that was obviously put into getting our district ready for starting school again in the fall. I clearly think we're more prepared now than we might have been in the spring. I had a quick question about the Wi-Fi hotspots that were being provided. So last week, the JDDPC met and there was a team from the Boys and Girls Club who came and they expressed concern about how this system was implemented last in the spring, where they said like numerous students experienced errors where their like data ran out or was at speeds that were too slow to have Zoom calls. So I was just curious, like how much data do these hotspots have? Because I think I read somewhere like a group Zoom call for only 1 hour uses up 2.5 gigabytes of data. And like, is this like an unlimited data plan? Like, will it be throttled after some amount? So I just like wondered if like you had more answers on like how that exactly would work to ensure that these students have access to internet that's necessary to do their schoolwork.
Sure, those are fabulous questions. So yes, in the springtime, when we got the hotspots, some of the challenges that we had, there was twofold challenges. One was we only had Sprint as a provider, and Sprint does not work in all of our neighborhoods as well as it works in other neighborhoods. So that proved to be a challenge for some students. The second was those hotspots only had the 2 gig. And as you mentioned, a Zoom class will far exceed that for that month. So what looks different for fall is that we have secured 2 more providers. So we will have Sprint, Verizon, and T-Mobile. What we were able to gather from the spring is that the areas where the Sprint hotspots did not work, we were able to verify that T-Mobile and or Verizon would work. In addition to that, any hotspot that is issued to a student will be unlimited. I don't know about the throttling down. I mean, a lot of, I'm sure you probably know a lot about that. Everyone gets on, they pull back. Even my home internet is very slow if everybody is on. So it's still, we may still experience, parts of the day that may be a little slower than other parts, and we're going to have to adjust. We do get a lot of reports with the hotspots, so we will be analyzing those. We will be able to see when you are logging on. We will be able to see what you're doing in the data and so forth. So we'll be able to measure that. So we'll constantly be able to also make changes as we get that data back.
Just quickly regarding that, so I had a question about the unlimited part, because I have AT&T for my data plan, and technically our data plan is unlimited, but if you use more than 3 gigabytes a month, throttles you down to speeds that you basically can't do anything with. So is the data plans truly unlimited, or is it something where after a certain amount they'll just throttle you down to useless speeds?
That is a great question. Tony, I don't know if you're still on. Tony's been talking to the providers, or maybe Rick can answer if it throttles down. I'm not sure. I'm sorry. I've been working on.
And talking to the Sprint, and this is Rick, and talking to the Sprint and T-Mobile representative, they are not going to be throttled down.
Okay.
They're fully unlimited. However, again, I'm just going to reiterate that those are hotspots and not broadband connections to the house.
Which is on the mobile network, which is in its nature limited.
Mm-hmm. But better solution than we had with the 2 gigabyte. And it addresses the needs of the North Fair Oaks students.
All right, I see Trustee Sarver followed by Trustee Thompson. And I just at this point would observe that we are on item 14.1 of our agenda, and we're nearing 8:30. So, but ask as many questions as slowly as you'd like.
Let me start by properly unmuting myself. I just want to quickly touch on those same 3 points that have been raised. First and foremost, the amount of work that has been put in by everyone on our staff, not only throughout the summer, but throughout the spring as well in this situation. But this was absolutely the summer that didn't happen for everybody. And the amount of work that we know the faculty has put in preparation for quality distance learning, and the huge range of places we have heard from about how working has been, the PD that we had in the spring, the additional PD that is coming up now, the preparation for that, but all of these other topic areas that we're touching on represents tremendous legwork that's been done across the summer when summer vacation wasn't happening. And I can't express enough my appreciation for that commitment and that work and that progress. And then these 2 topics we've been touching on, where we have been in continuous conversations with county representatives about internet connection in the community and about testing for the schools. And they are both reflective of trying to build the partnerships and where the limitations are. The county was very eager to engage in doing something about internet connectivity, but we still have questions about how comprehensive, how effective, how limited it's going to be. But clearly that needle has gotten moved a great deal from where we were in the spring. And that shows a lot of effort and what should be a lot of effectiveness in making a difference in that. But it's certainly going to be an absolute fundamental piece of infrastructure that we have to be all over from day one of class and every minute from now until then. The testing is going to become a bigger issue further down the line, but there is a lot more work to be doing there. And we have not seen the county stepping forward in any way and saying that they're going to be able to help with that. We keep hearing today's call was yet another repetition of that. You know, the county has got all they can handle in the range of testing, and we're going to go out and more or less magically find it through private providers. And there's bound to be enough resource out there for the addition of the entire school community onto a regular testing regimen. So we're going to need to keep pushing and pushing and pushing to make sure that we're not getting into a bidding war for severely limited resources, but that we are pushing and pushing for really a community-wide building of the resources that the whole community needs to get back on its feet. And that goes beyond something that the school community can just go off and do. We need fundamental health infrastructure support to get all the way there. You know, clearly great progress on such a broad range of fronts, and my appreciation to all the hard work going on. And I'm looking forward to every bit of the next steps we've got coming up, and the chance to be part of convocation on Monday.
Thanks, Alan. Trustee Thompson.
So I want to be respectful of President Weiner's guidance about the clock, but also think it's appropriate that each of us as board members recognize the amount of work. And I join my colleagues in giving thanks to really everyone across the district. As board members, I think, and as board members, we've had reports on what the district is doing. We've had the chance to review the side letter, which stipulates the agreement with the bargaining union and updates from the superintendent and other sources of information, individual conversations that give us some indication of what's going on. But to me, it seems like in the past couple months, our staff has had the monumental task of rethinking the way we teach. And for that, they all deserve our respect and thanks.
Thank you, Chris. You know, I'll be brief. I echo those comments. I think something that I said at the last meeting was that we are dealing with what Georgia, given her tendency to use cliches, has described as an unprecedented phenomenon of this pandemic. And I think it has not necessarily always brought out the best in us. In terms of our feelings of sadness and loss and anger. And yet at other times it has brought out the best in us when we remember why we're here, the work that matters to us, which ultimately is about delivering the best quality education. And I do feel, from my vantage point here in Birch, that in some ways a tide has been turned. And as we approach the resumption of school, there is more of a shared understanding or a shared commitment about what we're all trying to do, and we can move maybe beyond some of the things that have caused us to focus on our differences and our divisions, and can once again remind us of what draws us together, which is this work. So it is an encouraging presentation and it's an encouraging meeting, and I thank teachers and staff, all of you involved in this work. All right, further comments or questions on this item? If not, it's been a pretty long session. I'm looking at Ms. Montiel. You know, in the United Nations, if you are a simultaneous interpreter, I think they only let you work for like 30 minutes before you get to take a break. And we've been now at it for like 2.5 hours, and the rest of us are tired as well. So I propose, unless there's objection, that we take a short break and resume at 8:40 and pick up with our discussion of item 14.2, which is a report on spring semester grades. Seeing no objection, let's take a short break, and I'll see you all at 8:40. Hello. Welcome. Thank you for this. Thank you for the smile, Diana. Thank you. It's hard work up here. All right, so let's go ahead and resume with our meeting. This brings us back to item 4. It's for the 2019-2020 calendar year. And I understand that Ms. Hanson will be leading the presentation of this issue. Bonnie, you may still be on mute.
You know, I was in a meeting with Foothill College earlier this week, and they have a tradition where anytime that somebody doesn't remember to take themselves off of mute, everybody takes a drink of their water or their coffee. And I lost for sure in that meeting. Thank you everybody for having myself and Diana and Brandon here to present to you this evening. Before I get started, I do want to testify to the fact that yes, indeed, Alan Weiner has been saying that we needed an ethnic studies class since he first started on this board in what probably feels to him like a very long time ago. So this is an exciting time for us. And then I want to give a shout out to the unsung heroes of the summer, because while I will agree that Edith Salvatore worked all summer long, was extremely available, and worked hard with us to compromise and come up with the win-win solutions. The true heroes of the summer are the Salvatore triplets, whom we owe large Target gift cards or something of that sort for the taking of their parent during what was supposed to be her summer off. And then finally, I wanted to thank Trustee Novick for his grace in saying that this past summer that he feels he wanted to acknowledge that he was thankful because he feels that we are more prepared for school to start than we were in the spring. And what I have to say to that is it would be hard to be less prepared than we were for what happened in the spring. But thank you for putting it so nicely. The other thing that Trustee Novick pointed out was the disparities in access to the internet and therefore curriculum for many of our students. And Pablo talked about that in his presentation as well. And that's how we arrived at a very difficult and heartfelt decision by hundreds and hundreds of people who cared very deeply about the decision that was made. And it was a position in which it was a matter of choosing what was the best option for the most kids, and everybody had good points about why they thought the board should take the action that they did. So Carrie, you're right, this is not nearly as important as talking about the deeper issues of equity, but it was something that was a really hot topic last spring, and that we had said that we would report back on what we found. And so here we are to do that. So a little historical context. Once upon a time, last March, we went into shelter in place, and we started with our distance learning, and everyone worked really hard to do right by students. And it was very, very difficult to transition for students to learn how to learn online and for teachers to learn how to teach online, for us to get the correct materials to kids through internet, and really just to figure this all out in the midst of a crisis with so much unknown and so much anxiety. And so to that, as a nod to that, a pretty substantial nod, something changed in college entrance requirements. So in the past and in the future, it has been required by universities that for them to count a student as having completed a course, they must get at least a C-. So colleges have a list of courses that students need to complete for admission, and those courses all need to be completed with a C- or better. And in light of the inequities happening and the tumult across the country, for the spring of 2020 and the summer that just ended, students were told by universities, or school districts were told by universities, that a student transcript for the spring and summer semesters could have a C- or higher, or a grade of pass or higher, and that either one of those marks would count for the student having met that requirement for college admissions. They also were willing to accept a hybrid model. That wasn't the case at first, but then they went to saying a hybrid model was all right. And so districts could give kids the choice between a letter grade and a pass, no pass. And leadership in our district presented to this board that we did not feel that that was a good option because it forced students who wanted to be competitive for college to opt for the letter grade, because as we talked about then, each school turns in a school profile and students from that high school are held to the highest classes and grades that they can take in comparison with other students. So we said if we were trying to get rid of the inequities of the fact that many of our kids don't have reliable internet to really do their classes fully right now, then we don't get rid of that inequity if we go with a hybrid model. So on April 8th and April 15th, board meetings that will live in infamy, the board heard many, many opinions from many, many folks about this topic. And at the April 8th meeting, staff was charged with putting out some more surveys. We put out some previously, and with doing some more research because the board members wanted to be really, really clear about all of the information when they made this difficult decision. And it was not a unanimous decision by the board, but they were all very gracious in my unasked for opinion. And a decision was made to move to pass, no pass for the spring and summer 2020 semesters. And then a request was made by administration from the top all the way to the site VPs that teachers for the spring semester be as forgiving as they felt that they could be because of the inequities that students were experiencing. So in other words, if the kid's not doing the work, then you can't pass them. But if you can find creative ways for them to demonstrate their understanding, if you can go through your curriculum and really look at, we gave teachers time to look at what is it imperative that kids know when they get to the next level and focus on that in your classes and not spend as much time on some of the concepts that we love and that matter, but are not pivotal to a kid's success when they move on. And teachers were so responsive. And I am so grateful for the incredible compassion that they showed to our students and for their tireless work to get as many students over the goal line as possible. So tonight you're going to see the grade results for the spring semester in comparison with some years prior. And there were some essential questions that we asked that you're going to get answers to this evening. The first essential question was, what was the second semester pass rate across the district, given that we moved to pass, no pass system of grading in the second semester of the 1920 school year? Was the difference in pass rates consistent across grades? Was the difference in pass rates consistent across content areas? And then another question, not so much about the COVID, but last year was the first year that we made our entry level science course a UC A through G requirement of biology for all. So we wanted to look at, since it was the end of the first year of that initiative, how did freshmen do in biology for all? Diana Wilmot, who is just started working for us at the beginning of July and has been an utter dream team with Brandon Lee, has been texting me furiously during the equity presentation saying, hey, wait, we decided to not drill down on subgroups tonight because there's a lot more detailed and there's a lot more work we want to do on it before it gets presented to you. And I said, it's okay. We'll get that to them and make sure that it is available to everyone. I will just stay in short that to put it in a nutshell, all boats rose, but there was still an equity gap for sure. It looks like the equity gap may have gotten a little bit less large, but stay tuned on that because we want to do some research on that. I'm going to turn the floor over to Diana and to Brandon Lee, but first I must say an example of what a great team player Diana is that she said to me earlier in the board meeting, hey, are we going to recognize Brandon Lee tonight because it's his last board meeting before he retires? And I said, no, there's one more board meeting before Brandon retires. And Diana very politely basically said, but maybe he doesn't want to go to it if he doesn't have to present anything. So even though we recognized Brandon Lee at a board meeting last June for all of his incredible, incredible work that he's done for the district, and even though we will have a blowout celebration for him when there is a vaccine and a readily available treatment, I did want to let you know that this may well be his last board meeting and how much we will miss him. So now I will turn the floor over to Diana and Brandon. Happy hands from Alan Weiner.
Okay. Okay, let me just kind of get started. Hi everyone. The chart that's in front of you is shows the percentages of ninth graders who earned a UC A through G acceptable grade in second semester. The chart shows a trend over 4 years beginning in 2016-17, and it covers the 5 major content areas of world language, world history, English, math, and science. So the way in which we would read this graph is if we started with world language, the number of passed means for 2016, 17, 17, 18, 18, 19, those students received a C- or better or higher. And for 2019-20, those students received a pass compared to a no pass. So where it says the number failed, those are the number of students that did not receive a C- or received a no pass. So the trend for world language you can see for ninth graders was about 90% for the past 3 years. And then in 2019-20, it rose to 93%. For World Studies 2, the pass rates hovered for second semester in the low 80s and then rose to 93%. Similarly, in English, it was in the low 80s and then 91%. And in math, the pass rate was in the high 70s and it rose to 91%. And in English, it was in the low 80s and it rose to 91%. Diana, do you want to?
Oh, sorry, you ready for me? Okay, that's great.
Okay.
Thanks, Brandon. It really has, I just want to echo Bonnie's appreciation of you. It's been really incredible working with you for the last month, and I'm very fortunate that the district thought so smartly about having us cross over our time together so that I could see all the great work that has been happening around data and really be able to connect with you and share some of our ideas together. And I'm glad that we get a chance to present together tonight at the board meeting and acknowledge that work. Bonnie, thank you for the introduction. And I just have to say the first 30 days or my first month here has been really special. I think that, you know, the work that I'm sharing here tonight is a very small snippet of some of the work that's going to come around. You know, I'm hoping to do another presentation in 100 days around, definitely around equity. And I was definitely texting to Bonnie talking about the equity gap around pass rates, and I'll do an analysis more deeply about that as we go forward. The topic was really like, did we pass more classes, you know, in general? Like, did the policy make a difference for kids? Did more kids pass? And I, you know, as an analyst, as a data analyst, there's always more to analyze, but we wanted to take the dashboards that we've been looking at over the years and kind of collapse it and try to present one snapshot. So this is just the ninth grade semester pass rates. Brandon shows you the table. I'm showing you the graph. The graph just gives you a picture of this, you know, boat rising, so to speak. You could see it very clearly in math, especially from the 78 to 91% in ninth grade. And I think you're going to see that trend in math through all four grades. That's a little foreshadowing for what you'll see for the findings. Language doesn't have as many students who participate in it. I think you'll see that again when you look at the 10th grade slide. If you didn't notice it in the 9th grade slide, the numbers of students who participate is generally less. So there wasn't as much of an impact. But I just want to pay attention, and Brandon will point out to you in 10th grade when certain subjects are required was it world history, Brandon, in 10th grade? That really, you'll see a difference there.
Okay.
And then of course in senior year when government and econ play a role. So back to you, Brandon.
Okay, so this is the 10th grade pass rate. So you can see that for world language, again, it was at 80 in the high 80s, and now it moved to 93% in world history. So in 10th grade, it is modern European history or Western Civ, and it was in the 80s, and then it rose to 92%. English, similarly, 80s, and then it moved to 89. Math, mid 70s, moved to 88. Science, low 80s, and then moved to 91% in terms of the pass grades.
And before you turn the page on that, I want to acknowledge one of the reasons we wanted to include the tables in addition to the graphs is to look at the hundreds of students that were impacted. Because when you're just looking at percentages and bars, yeah, you can get the general trend. But Bonnie specifically wanted us to show these numbers because you can look at, for example, in that world European history for 10th grade, right? You went from 473 who failed to 177 who failed, and those kids popped up into the passing. And that's just a significant number of students that were really impacted by this policy. And there it is, there's the graph again. You'll see that that 3-year trend is pretty consistent. Had it not been a COVID year, had it not been a pass, no pass year, I would be really surprised that the yellow bar didn't look exactly like the other 3 right next to it. So it's just a signal that the policy made a difference for students. The difference in math right there, you could see in the 10th grade is 12%. 12% difference from the year before. There's some subjects where it gets up as high as 15% growth from one year to the next, but it is definitely a significant change across all subject areas. And the pass rate in general is not that different from 9th grade at this point. 9th grade to 10th grade. They're pretty consistent.
Mm-hmm. And similarly, it's going to follow the same pattern. Here's 11th grade for world language from the high 80s to 93%. US history from the low 80s to 92%. English, low 80s to 91%. Math, mid 70s to 89% passing. And then science from the low 80s to 90%.
Junior year, such an important year. This is the year that I know those kids are going to have passes on their transcripts, but it's going to count for A through G. It made a difference for a lot more kids this year. I'm going to allude to it later, but when we look at our A through G pass rates and we look at our junior year, ultimately look at this class and how they will graduate from Sequoia and look at their graduation rates and their college going rates. It'll be interesting to sort of follow this trend. Junior year is such an important year, and it's great to see more kids engaged in passing.
Okay, and then here's our seniors from world languages up to 97%. Government, econ 95%, English 94%, math 92%, and then science 94%.
And this is where we see these are the graduates. It's the class of 2020. There are kids that probably would not have graduated had they not passed that government or econ class. It may not have passed that last English class that's required, and may not have moved on to their next level of education or next choice in their career. But being able to get to this spot, I think we will see, well, I think you saw in the summer graduation ceremony, fewer students graduating in the summer graduation because they had graduated in the spring. And part of that is due to this. World language did have a huge jump too. It's interesting, the seniors in world language at that point are much fewer, but that had the greatest 12th grade pass rates for world language should have a greater pass rate in that regard. So just the preliminary findings was across the district in every grade, every subject area, the pass rate was significantly greater than the prior year trend. Again, without that policy, I think that this, you would have seen something very similar all 4 years, but this case we saw all boats rise. Mathematics across all 4 grades showed the greatest change, ranging from 11% to 16%, depending on the grade level from the prior year. And when we looked at the 9th grade biology for all, we were starting to drill down a little bit into looking at schools. I'm like, they're all in biology, and noticing that that increase was 11% compared to the last year for all the students. Yeah, next slide. This is something I personally, plan to share with the principals in tomorrow's camp meeting. I'll be offering to go drill down with them and look more closely, work with the subject area councils, work with the administrators if they want to create their own presentation and share with their own teaching groups and customize presentations for them. This is where the data gets to meet the teachers and the students where they're at. So I'm looking forward to working with our administrators, our subject area councils. I'm hoping to conduct some focus groups to understand how the policy impacted the teachers and the students in their grading practices. And then when we look at the, kind of more of a 100-day report, I'll look at the A through G completion and the graduation rates, see how that impacted, if the policy impacted that as well. And now that we are moving back to a grading policy with A through F, we'll study the pass rates again to see if the trend continues or if it falls back into the three-year trend before. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to continuing the analysis.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So it's a little hard for me to see, but do I have comments? Carrie, you're raising a manual hand. Yeah.
So I just have to be honest again, I'm not loving this agenda item. Are we trying to say that we should be no pass forever because kids do better? And what I also want to say is we had hundreds and hundreds of letters from teachers, right? I read every letter, every word, hundreds of letters. Teachers, some of our teachers, I didn't count how many, but many felt pressured to pass kids. I heard that over and over again. So this is an example of where it's an incomplete data set, right? Or we're asking the wrong question. Like I said earlier, and I'm going to say it again, what we need, we had kids who couldn't get online. We had kids who struggled, and we have kids who struggle. So I'm not blaming staff. Maybe I'm looking at my board colleagues for wanting this agenda item. It's an incomplete data set. We have to have smart data, and we have to be real. So why did so many teachers felt that to be compassionate, right? And I know the community felt they were being compassionate by going to pass, no pass. I hated that policy. I thought it was terrible because many kids suffered from that policy decision. Kids, including low-income kids who were getting their first B, their first A, kids who struggled. It was a terrible policy decision. So what is the point of this agenda item? I'm looking at my board colleagues for this. This is an example of incomplete data. So what are we going to do with this? Go to pass, no pass forever? why is this even an agenda item?
Other trustee Jack.
Okay, anyways, what I'm going to say is something completely different. My question is probably for Diana, and it makes me wonder really around what our standard sort of grading scale is, right? Or the system that we use seems like it might be putting a thumb on grades and depressing them perhaps. It's hard to know exactly. And so I guess I would want to look at either, especially around math, right? Because I think math is a little complicated. It is anyways, but we also were trying to do a new initiative this year, which unfortunately got stuck in the pandemic like so many things. And I think we would want to know a little bit more about that, you know, that particular initiative. So I sort of want to look at those kids in particular, and I really would want to look at just Algebra 1 rates, because we know Algebra 1 is the gatekeeper for A through G college going kids, right? And it's what keeps our kids of promise out of college frequently. So to me, what would be more important is looking around that particular data set. And again, you know, maybe it's around some grading practices more than other things. I would want to separate out that group of kids that were in that Algebra 1 initiative, perhaps. I don't know. You have the PhD. I just have the questions, but that's kind of where I go as opposed to just sort of this big wholesale apples and oranges. I'd really just want to look at something that's tight. Although overall, I mean, it's very interesting. It's just really an interesting idea. But again, it just makes me wonder about grading practices when I look at it in that sort of bigger sense. That's all. Thanks.
I'll respond. Nothing would make me happier than analyzing Algebra 1. No, it's what my area of research was in. So as well as college readiness and the area around students' success. So Victoria and I will work on that together, I'm sure, because we already are starting our collaboration around working with our math consultants and grading practices and assessments and everything. So, and I agree with you. I think that, you know, delving and understanding the practices deeper, it's kind of why I mentioned the focus group piece around talking to our teachers. And I hear you, Trustee Dubois, I hear you too, in terms of trying to understand more about what the teachers felt in terms of the pressure to pass students. So qualitative data that we can gather from focus groups will be really helpful in informing our decisions as we move forward.
Trustee Thompson and then Trustee Nori.
I wonder if each of the board members are going to form different conclusions on this report, because certainly I differ in some ways from both colleagues. One, I'd cite that data sets are frequently incomplete, and educational data sets are almost always incomplete. There are PhD papers written about how to deal with missing data and complicated formulas for addressing that. So I took this report. I am grateful for the report. It's provided one simple set of facts for me, and the numbers that were most important was the drop in the number of kids we failed was substantial in every category, which to me means that for the spring quarter, we didn't penalize students who are most at risk, that those students will have the opportunity to progress towards graduation without being set back by something that happened in the spring. That was the rationale for my vote on that issue, and I'm glad to have the report that supports that. Frankly, I wouldn't be optimistic about going any deeper with the data for this reason. I don't think we know whether a pass meant the same thing for spring quarter as it did in the past. And without that measurement, there's really not, I'm not sure that we're going to learn much from it. Plus, I'd also like to hope that the spring experience was a total one-off, that we will never again face anything like that. And so the lessons we might learn from that, I hope won't apply to anything going further. So my first inclination was to let's look at the subsets. I am interested to see if the principals have, whether you get different reactions from the principals about things they want to learn. But right now, my conclusion is we failed less students. That was really important at a difficult time. I'm grateful for the report. Thanks.
Trustee Nori, do you mind if I jump the queue a little bit, just because my comment follows so immediately on top of what Trustee Thompson just said, and that is, not only do we not know in some metaphysical sense about whether a pass in the spring of 2020 meant the same thing as a pass in the spring of 2019, but even in like the non-metaphysical sense, because what counts as a pass in 2020 includes a D, and in any other year, right, it wouldn't include a D, right? Because in fact, we were using the A through G standards. So every kid who got a D did work that would have earned a D. In 2020 got a pass, but would have been included actually in the fail category for previous years, right? Because you only are counted as passing if person. That's just something I do for free. But if we are going to drill down, particularly into biology for all, because I agree with Trustee Thompson, like whatever happened in the spring of 2020, it's like Vegas, it stays in the spring of 2020, right? And I don't think there are deep lessons to be learned about education going forward. But if we're trying to really then look at biology for all, and how does biology for all compare to the way that we've done ninth grade science in the past, then the fact that we're actually measuring apples and oranges becomes particularly problematic. So I would, we answered the question that was asked, which is, by going to a pass-fail system, did we increase the number of kids who failed? Answer, no. Okay, that is a smart question. It's a narrow question, and your data answers it. But I wouldn't, like Trustee Thompson, I wouldn't really try to do much more with that. Sorry again for jumping the queue. Trustee Nori, over to you.
Oh, no problem. I had more of a comment than a question. Like, I personally had like mixed thoughts on whether pass failure was good or not. But what I feel is, especially for like freshmen and sophomores, what might be like more important than whether or not they like passed Algebra 1 was like how prepared they're going to be for classes that they're going to take. Because especially on something like math, where I know like a lot of classes didn't finish learning all the material before distance learning. Even if they passed Algebra 1, like, are they set up for in like geometry or Algebra 2 where they're building off all these curriculums? Like, are they prepared to do well, or did you just kick the bucket down the line? So now more of them are going to fail in the future. So that's like something I'd be more concerned about, is like not necessarily like, oh, how many people passed or like what grade people got, but like, did they actually learn the material enough so that they can succeed in the future?
Is it okay if I respond to that?
Yeah, I'm not sure that's a question for Diana as much as it is for Bonnie.
Sure. So I think that is the big question. And it's part of the reason that this year's LCAP, one of the things that they're asking us to determine is how we're going to measure learning loss. So what kind of a measurement are we going to use at the start of the year, and what are we going to use at the end of the year to determine what happened to our students when they're trying to learn in a distance setting? So we have the same question that you do. I will say that at the end of the year, one of the things that teaching teams did was they did kind of a dear next year's teaching team. So if I was an English 2 teacher, then I made with my team at my site, everyone else who teaches English 2, I filled out a document of the standards that I felt like we covered well, and the standards that I felt like we didn't get to spend as much time on as I would have liked to have spent. And then how kids were doing, using assessments to make that determination, not just did I say it to them, but did they demonstrate that they understood it? And now sites will be able to, at the next level, say, oh, sorry, the other thing that they did was, in addition to their Dear English 3 team, the other thing that the English 2 team did was they've said, and they've done it before, but they said, what is it really important that kids know when they get to our level? So what they'll be able to do now is they have got their Dear English 2 letter from the English 1 team, and they'll be able to look at what the English 1 team said they did and did not cover thoroughly. And they'll be able to look at their list of what is it that kids need to be really successful in this class, and see where are the learning gaps that we need to make up. Your concern is one that we all have.
I'm going to call now on Trustee Sarver to be followed by Principal Priest.
Okay, this time I'm not making anybody drink a lot. I unmuted myself right away. So first of all, boy, welcome to the team, Student Trustee Nori. I'm loving the questions you're asking. I think that was absolutely the critical question there. And I am glad that we engaged Ms. Hansen in that good response, that it is indeed what we're all really focused on. And I do think that President Weiner basically went ahead and made the comments I was going to make, that this was about the simple question of, did we fail more students? And the answer is no. That question was thrown at us very strongly and specifically as a challenge by many in the community during the ongoing debates about the validity of the pass not pass, and that we were actually harming the grading outcomes of the students that we were most concerned about with this. And I think really the one takeaway you can have from this was to the question of, did we implement a policy that inflicted additional punishment on our most underserved, most at-risk students from the technical exacerbation of the pandemic? The answer is no, we did not punish them. We succeeded at protecting them more effectively from extra punishment of grading on top of the problem of the pandemic interfering with their education. And to me, that's the only simple takeaway here. Aside from that, it is purely the anomaly of the difficult pivot into distance instruction under circumstances that did not support it. And yes, there were pressures on all of our teachers to not harm the kids with intentionally harsh grading. And the outcome that we see is that there were positive passing results. And I don't think there's more for us as a leadership team to take away from it going forward.
Okay, over to Sean, followed by Satvik, and then a reminder that we have 10 discussion items yet to navigate.
Okay, I think that's my cue. Thank you, Trustee Weiner. I'm super interested in this discussion and especially where it's gone. As you guys know, I'm very passionate on the topic of grading and what it means and what it says about our values. I'm super interested in connecting this conversation with the very first presentation that we heard. And I share your enthusiasm for the Equity Advisory Task Force. I was so proud to see members of my staff leading tonight. And I would just kind of, having spent a lot of time peeking around the corner over the past couple of years and especially this summer, I hear a lot of assumptions being made on this board about grades and traditional grades and grades in college prep courses being a metric of success. I would just, give everybody a little bit of a warning that when we talk about grades in that way, there's a growing and very compelling school of thought that sees that type of grading and those types of definitions of success as one of the main buttresses of what we're increasingly becoming more comfortable calling white supremacy culture. I would direct you to the work of, let's say, Evan Weaver from Ball State University. If you want something a little more more fun, check out Joe Truss. But these are increasingly interesting concepts, and looking at how we use grades to define success and how that definition of success does a lot of damage to the kinds of groups that we're all very happy up here to talk about wanting to protect. So just looking around the corner, spending a lot of time thinking about the things that we can connect some of these ideas. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Sean. That's obviously a provocative suggestion that suggests, much deeper examination and inquiry. And I think there has been some interest on this board in digging into grades. And I think we essentially learned that it would be a third rail to kind of try to take that on from a top-down approach here in the boardroom. That I think even you said this is something that you have to kind of, build cultures locally. So happy to kind of participate in those conversations, but I don't think anybody's looking for us to issue edicts on grading. Satvik?
Oh, I just had a quick question. So like about the data set, when we're saying like no students were harmed, can we really say with confidence that those like 7 or 10% of people who failed would not, or would have still failed without the pass-fail system during the quarter? Because I feel like all the data says is like less people failed, but do we know that the people who did fail didn't fail because of the situation with COVID and failed because of like other circumstances? Like, do we really know that that's the case?
No.
Just having made the comment, to me, it is just that we know that fewer people failed. All we're looking at there is raw numbers, and the year-on-year comparisons of student performance is looking at one group compared to another, going through maybe what might be a roughly equivalent experience, and you're just saying what raw number, what raw percentage had a successful or a failed outcome one year and the next. It's never very clear whether that's saying, oh, okay, we improved the experience in some manner. The outcomes were different.
I mean, here I would encourage you, Satvik, to have a conversation offline with Diana about the challenge of causal inference, right? I mean, you have large data sets and you're controlling for a ton of things, and you have one major variable which is different, which certainly is the kind of thing that we would say provides a pretty strong suggestion that there's a causal explanation. But again, the science of data inference is, when I was learning it, they said you actually can't ever solve the problem of causation. That is just philosophy. We've come a lot further in terms of actually trying to address this question more scientifically, but that's what we do with big data sets, right? Is you manipulate one variable, you see significant changes in results, and you think like, that variable must have made a difference. And then we ask questions like, why might that not be true? Maybe it's because one group is A's through C minuses and the other population is A's through D's, and maybe they're not exactly the same. So that's exactly the work that we do. Simone? Ms. Rick Kennel?
I'm here. Yeah.
I see your hand.
As a fan of qualitative data, I also don't think what we can capture is the hard work that went into all the intervention, the phone calls, the outreach, the connecting with kids, the amazing campus aides that got on the phone and connected with mentoring students to say, hey, we need to get you to cross the finish line. What type of assignment do we need to get you to do this? Our aspirations advocate coordinator, there was a lot of outreach. So I just wanted to reiterate that I think for some kids, that might've made all the difference as well. So that's all, my qualitative piece there.
Excellent contribution to the discussion, Ms. Rick Kennel. Thank you very much. So I think that brings us to the end of our consideration of this issue. And I think, we're grateful for the data and we take it for what it's worth, not less, not more. But I think it does help us answer at least one important question that was presented to the board during the spring with respect to the policy choice that we made on grading, which, by the way, some of you may remember, for the record, I wasn't in favor of. So I'm, odd that I'm now rallying in defense of what this data shows. Let's move on now to item 14.3, which is our first reading of a revised board policy. We have a number of board policies that we're get to chunk through. Chunk being a synonym for carefully reflect on and deliberate about in a nuanced way. You may remember that some of these actually were on an agenda like when we first moved to Zoom, and that was when the Russians apparently were taking over our internet, and we parachuted out of the meeting, while it was still underway. So some of these we actually started to have on our agenda a really long time ago. Jackie, do you want to start us with 14.3, BP 4112.2? I'll just say one thing as a member of the policy committee. My feeling is that all of these are sort of the technical and law compliance things, except I'm sure Chris found stuff, that captures where our soul is reflected in a particular passage and we got it wrong. But for the most part, I thought these were pretty technical updates and modifications. Jackie?
This is an update of the board policy that gives us a little bit more flexibility in hiring for what's called a limited assignment option for a teacher that may not be have a preliminary or a clear credential particular subject area. You're going to see another one of these, and then probably another one of these as time goes on, because there were a number of people that were in credentialing programs last spring that were not able to complete their credentials or their student teaching or whatever it was. So this is the first of, I think, a series that you will see that provides us with some options for teachers that do not have a clear or preliminary credential.
Are there comments or questions on the proposed revisions to board policy 4112.2? Okay, seeing none, this is just a discussion item, but I assume that it'll be fine to bring this back for its second reading and approval on consent. Item 14.4 is board policy and AR 6172 concerning concurrent enrollment. This one's maybe a little bit more substantive. Bonnie?
Yes, this is updated policy to reflect the state's new commitment to a K through 14 pathways for students. So it gives some more leniency for students who are pursuing CTE course pathways, that they don't have to be included in the percentile of students in a given district who are fulfilling classes at the community college.
Thanks. Are there comments or questions on these board policy modifications? Okay. Seeing none, I suggest that we proceed the same way and bring this back next time on consent. That brings us to item 14.5. Which involves three changes to three identical, or similar changes to three identical policies on lactation accommodation. Jackie?
So you're going to see employee notifications, just like the last one. It's going to come up several times over the next few months, because as new laws are put in place, there are requirements to notify our employees. And so this is the exhibit, which lists all of the notifications that we must push out. And then my staff works on going through that list and making sure we have all of them as we push them out. This is the first. You'll see another one probably in 2 weeks. It does adds some gender changes in the notifications. So again, this is pretty standard that you'll see exhibits for employee notifications probably several times over the next few months.
Thank you, Jackie. Any comments or questions on that item? I see board members shaking their heads no. So I think we can go ahead and proceed the same way with item 14.5. That brings us to 14.6, which maybe is a little bit more substantive. Crystal, do you want to talk to us about changes with respect to food service operations in BP and AR 3551?
Absolutely. So these updates to the board policy reflect a new law to prevent meal shaming. So it provides students with unpaid meals and pulls back any denial of a meal of choice for our students. It also reflects a new waiver for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, extending just their 3-year administrative review as well to this same board policy.
Comments or questions on board policy or AR 3551?
Alan, you're muted.
I asked if there were any comments or questions on that one, and I think I would have got the same reaction if I hadn't been muted, which is that there are none. So let's plan on proceeding with 3551 the same way and bringing it back for its second reading on consent. That brings us to item 14.7, which is BP and AR 4113 on certificated assignments. Jackie?
So this is a revision of this board policy and administrative regulation. They are setting up a statewide system to analyze the data and look at vacancies. And so this puts us into that an annual monitoring of the assignments of our certificated employees. And we do this on every year. We do an audit. We're required to do an audit. So it's not really going to change our practices that much because we do audit our certificated employees to make sure they are appropriately assigned to within their subject matter.
Okay, thanks. Comments or questions on this item? And I just would like to, point out to my colleagues that this just gives you a small taste of the fun that is the board policy committee. Any comments or questions on this item? No? Okay. All right, so let's bring a 4113 on certificated assignment back next time for second reading on consent. That brings us to item 14.8, which concerns employee compensation. Well, we all like compensation, Jackie, so what's going on here?
So this is just a technical revision that deletes the labor code citation that doesn't apply. It's the ed code provisions that apply to schools.
Okay. Comments or questions on 4151, 4251, and 4351 concerning employee compensation being governed by ed code rather than labor code? All right. Let's plan, Madam Superintendent, to bring that one back for second reading on consent. That brings us to item 14.9, which is the BP and the AR on student non-discrimination and harassment. Jackie, this one, can you explain? This seems like it would be a weightier issue. What's in here?
So you probably think this is a weightier issue because this one came again to the policy committee. This is the one previously that we didn't do on that very, very late night. And this is simply a requirement to post the non-discrimination policies, the non-discrimination policies and the federal laws. You're going to see again another one come up in a first reading that is more, that are those changes that are more substantive. This is just about posting.
Okay, great. Comments or questions then on BP or AR 5145.3 on student non-discrimination or harassment? Okay. Let's bring that one back for second reading on closed session. Item 1410, board policy and administrative reg 6020 on parent involvement. And it looks like Ms. Hanson, you're going to explain what's going on here to us.
Yes, this is updated language to reflect what we need to be doing as far as involving our families in the process for developing our LCAP, as well as parent involvement in general. We're already doing what this policy requires, so we're super happy about that. We recommend adopting this policy, except that we made one change because the lawyer amongst us felt that the word that was provided by CSBA, which was engage parents, guardians, and family members in the first paragraph, sorry, it actually there said involve. And he believed that engage was a better choice for a reason that made sense to me at the time, but I no longer remember.
I do, as it happens, and it's because engage, this requirement comes from a particular federal statute. It's USC 6318, and I was a little surprised by the scope of the obligation. So I went to look at what the law said, and it turns out that the actual statute uses the word engage rather than involve. And I thought, well, if we're implementing the statute, why don't we actually use their language rather than gloss it? So yeah, so this is a more faithful application of the federal statute than came from the CSBA update. I'm not bragging.
The one other thing that I failed to mention is that in the AR, you will see a lot of red, but most of that red is not bold. That means that it is language that already existed in the AR, but CSBA has seen fit to move it to a new place in the document, but it's not actually new language.
Okay, so it was very comforting to the those board members who were on the policy committee to actually be assured that we are in fact doing all of these things that are mandated under this. So are there further comments, or are there any comments on this proposed these proposed changes to this BP AR 6020? Chris Thompson.
Mr. Weiner, I just assumed you liked the word engage better than involve, or more descriptive in a way. My question doesn't go to the soul of the district. I think it's pretty straightforward. Bonnie may have answered it in some ways with the talking about the red text, but there's reference to redistribution of funds, reserve funds, and I simply wanted to ask whether that would have any sort of financial impact on the district or how the district distributes money. I assume that would go to Crystal, but Bonnie may know.
I do, but if Crystal wants, go ahead, Crystal, you're the money lady.
Well, I haven't read the board policy. I'm sorry. I would assume usually when we have money that we have to spend on engagement, what we don't is tied to the LCAP. It would fall to the bottom line. We would have to carry it over and use those same funds next year.
But in this particular case, I think it says it has to go to the high needs schools, right?
Yes, and we already do that in our allotting of funds, Chris.
Okay, great.
This is the Title I budget. You know, we have that separate.
Dollars.
We have that separate report every year on what we do with our Title I money, the little dedicated Title I presentation. So yeah.
But the policy doesn't. We can safely say the policy doesn't force us to redistribute money in ways that we were not doing before.
It requires us to distribute money in the way that is mandated under federal law, which has not changed. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so further comments or questions on BP? Which one are we talking about now? I've lost my place. Is this 6020?
Yes.
Okay. So then that brings us to item 1411, which is BP and AR 0430 on our comprehensive local plan for special education, which is obviously a very, very substantive issue. Bonnie?
Yes, so about a year ago, the SELPA document was redone, and this is just board policy catching up with that. So everything that you see here, we are already doing. And then we are, that gives you a choice of which of the three categories of SELPAs you fall into. And we fall into SELPA 3 because we are a conglomerate. We do this with the County Office of Education. But in short, we're already doing this. SELPA had already updated their documents for what we needed to do differently, and now that's being reflected in the Ed Code.
I asked some questions during this meeting about how this plan is developed. And again, I was assured that the district is able to participate meaningfully in the planning such that we're able to comply with these requirements. Again, since it is a collective body of multiple school districts. I was wondering, like, are we able to ensure that we're meeting our own obligations? But I was assured that that was okay. So any comments or questions on 0430, the comprehensive local plan for special education? Okay, so let's go ahead and bring that one back. And that brings us to our last board policy that we are reviewing for tonight, which concerns high school graduation requirements. This change was brought to us because of a very narrow fix, but it caused us to discover something more substantial maybe, and I'll let Ms. Hanson describe that.
Well, I'm glad that this is coming up when there are fewer people on this board meeting, because I feel pretty darn sheepish about this one. So shout out to Stephanie Ogden, who has bravely stayed on this call to speak to this particular item. Stephanie, do you want to talk about the change, the original reason that we brought this, or do you want me to do it?
I'm fine either way, Bonnie.
Go for it.
We originally brought this forth because we really found that we only teach 11th and 12th grade, and I don't have enough teachers to cover all the 10th grade classes with everything that they need, even though we do a lot of makeup. And so it is not a graduation requirement of the state. It is a local board decision to have that much social studies in the graduation requirement. And it was really bogging our students down in terms of not letting them graduate because they needed more credits in world history. So I have requested, I think last December, that I kind of started talking about this, just in terms of that I didn't think that that should weigh our students down if it wasn't really required. The other thing that happens is our students get bogged down with support classes. Maybe not so much because there's so many changes that have been made, but a lot of our students have to take a lot of support classes, which waste all of their elective options. And so I wanted to increase our elective options to support them to experience other and different things than support classes, possibly CTE. So we would waive that 5 world and move that to elective. So we would still have a graduation credit requirement of 200 credits.
Discovered is we had realized that there was actually no place in any of our board policies, as near as we could find, where we said how many credits a student needed to graduate from Sequoia. So that explains the sentence added at the end of the first paragraph, which is unrelated to the policy change that Stephanie is, advocating. That was just kind of a cleanup. So the substantive issue here is essentially permitting students at our alternative high school to be required to take one less semester world history class. So are there comments or questions on that issue? Trustee Dubois?
I just completely support this. So
Okay.
that's my comment.
Excellent. Trustee Sarver?
Long overdue.
Trustee Sarver?
Same thing. Well explained, and thank you. I support that.
Okay, well, I know George and I are on board, so, and Chris is waving enthusiastically too, so I think that means that we can also plan to bring this one back on consent next time. Doesn't appear that there's additional work that needs to be done. So that brings us to the conclusion of our discussion items for this evening. Good job, team, getting through the policies. We have no action items tonight. So that does bring us to item 16, which is our comments and some agenda setting. And I did want to give the superintendent a chance to begin on agenda setting, only because we had at previous meetings raised a number of different issues, and the board expressed support for the idea of adding those issues to our agenda. In particular, there was the very large issue of ethnic studies. There was the maybe narrower issue in terms of presentation of the reintegration of students from the juvenile justice system back into our high schools. And then there was the maybe in between project in terms of getting a better understanding of the functions of our SROs so that the board could evaluate whether that was consistent with a policy that we wanted to continue. And I think Trustee Sarver and I, at our last agenda setting meeting, asked the superintendent to come back to the board with some suggestions or proposals for dates on which we might take each of those 3 topics up. So perhaps Superintendent Stretchley, you could help us with that, and then we could just go through the normal thing where we all talk about stuff that we feel like talking about.
Thank you, President Weiner. You covered most of my topic. I don't have the exact dates. I know I've talked about it with individuals in cabinet, especially since we're scrambling to open school. I think the August 19th seems pretty soon on some of these. So Bonnie, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we said that the ethnic studies would be something like beginning or mid-September, either the September 2nd or the second meeting in September. Which one was it?
It was the second meeting in September, so that we
second
could
meeting.
get school launched and then come up with a proposal for a timeline.
Good. The SRO topic, which could also be maybe combined a little bit with the transition to juvenile justice. I've only had a brief opportunity to bring it up to student services and very little opportunity to bring it up to the principals because they're so focused on opening school. But the idea would be that Jarrett and Alvaro would work with principals and AVPs to maybe come up with some recommendations about how they may want to take the opportunity to think about the SRO topic, maybe forming student commissions or figuring out where they want to go forward on that sort of discretionary money that they have for keeping our campuses safe. But we also have to balance that with an evaluation of the resource and the need. And so originally we said bump it to August 19th, but we may want a little bit of breathing room. So I think we'll say the first meeting in September. It doesn't have to be, we won't come up with anything really, really extensive, but I think we can give the board a preliminary idea of where we would like to go with that topic after we've been able to touch base with AVPs and principals on that. We've received several letters from students and alumni and community members to defund the SRO, just to give it context. But they can play a valuable role, but we have to, we also need to take a pause and consider that the idea of that. And we've also reached out to city managers at Redwood City and Menlo Park so that we can get them involved in the conversation, because really the partnership is with our cities in those contracts. So we'll say the first week in September for now, and we'll come back also with an update on the progress of our Equity and Diversity Council. There was, yes, a very ambitious timeline, which I do agree some amount of urgency to visibly show that we can make progress. One item is tough because we have to have if we consider a position, we need to bring it to the board, and so that will shift up those. Plus, we need to get an opportunity to have Nicole Anderson really start stepping into the work and helping us create a process. So that would probably, on the update of the presentation, the report back to the board wasn't until late September, early October. And so that's where we'll put that one. And I don't know why I'm losing my voice all of a sudden. So I'll end it there.
Just to make, so the reintegration from juvenile justice and the SRO would be September 2?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Okay, are there other board members who have comments on either things they've done or agenda items? I see Trustee Sarver and then I see Trustee Jack.
This is an item that I don't think is urgent, but I think we want to get it done before the election rolls around. And I've raised it before. I think we want to have another conversation about the board protocol on election of officers in the reorganizational meeting with the view to achieving fully trustee district elections, bringing in a representative of District E for the first time, and taking into account how the rotation might be adjusted by the addition and departure of individual trustees due to election results. The first by trustee election we had, there was no change, and we knew that in advance because neither of the seats was contested. So we were able to just follow our protocol and rotate the 5 of us, and there was no problem. But when we're talking about new people coming on, when we're talking about not just moving an individual up or down the rotation, but actually moving around the turn of a particular trustee district in a role on the board, I think we want to become a little bit more explicit with our understanding of what we want to do. And I think it's worthy of some discussion by the board between now and November.
Well, it certainly doesn't sound like the kind of issue that would require a ton of staff time. Are there other board members who agree that that is a suitable topic to discuss? I see Trustee Dubois saying yes. I think Thompson, everybody's saying yes. So, all right. So Sarver, you and I have to remember this, and Trustee or Superintendent Stretchley also to add this to the list of something that at some point has to be added to our agenda. I feel that it might mean that we don't get to spend as much time on board policies as I would like, but so be it. Other comments? Georgia, you were next in the queue.
Yeah, I just had a quick one going back to the policing issue. I just want to remind everybody that Redwood City, the city of Redwood City, is holding conversations around this specific issue, and specifically next week, I think, if I know what today's date is, Thursday, August 13th is a youth focus session specifically from 3 to 5 p.m. with a registration. And then there are 2 additional ones on August 17th and August 27th that are, one is the 17th is English with Spanish interpretation, and the 27th is Spanish with English interpretation. And I believe I read somewhere that our board was going to be invited to participate or not participate, but observe, I think is the right word.
We're not invited.
No, not to participate, because guess what? We're not youth. I know it's shocking to everyone, but I just wanted to find out what this, if that's in fact the case, and also wondering how many of the adults, not youth, could observe that, because that might be something principals or AVPs would benefit from as well. That is my only comment.
Do we know who's organized? I mean, is that like a real question? Like we should find out how many people can go? Is that totally up to us, or is that something to ask the hosts?
I think that I would suggest that the superintendent should consider asking the city manager of Redwood City what ability there is to allow the adults of our district who should observe to participate.
Excellent.
I did touch base with Melissa. Most of them are already full. And so they were going to add more. So, but I'll check in on the specific one for the students if they can maybe stream it on Facebook so we can watch it, or YouTube, so we can make sure that we can be involved.
Okay, thank you. Other board comments or questions? All right, seeing none, it looks like we might finish our meeting without having to take a formal decision to extend beyond our 10 p.m. turning into pumpkin time. So I'd invite a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Great. Thank you all very much for a rich discussion. Thank you, and Zoom wave goodbye.